Check, check, 1, 2. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Dr. Funk live show. Thank you guys so much for subscribing on Apple Music, YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, everywhere else you can get stuff. Thank you guys also for donating. It's the first show of 2021. A lot has happened, but on this date, on 1/21/16, was Prince's final show at Paisley Park. Little did we know then what was going to happen. He did 2 amazing shows at what was called the Gala at Paisley Park, Piano A Microphone Gala. And we were so lucky to have with us the person that worked the shows, sound engineer extraordinaire of so many different things, and just an audiophile expert on different levels. You guys are in for a super treat whenever we have him on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and the only Scottie Baldwin.
Good evening, Doc.
Good evening, sir. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing all right. Doing good. A lot has happened, but even though in the past year, it seemed like it took 5 years. I can't believe it's been 5 years since that show at Paisley Park.
Yeah, it seems strange that 5 years ago this minute, I don't know what time he took the stage that night, but
About
8 o'clock, right? I think
like we did. Yes.
Time moves very quickly, especially nowadays. And so it's 5 years already. That's crazy.
Right. Now, he started talking about this in 2015 and was supposed to take it on the road overseas first. Then there was scalping going on. Then there was an attack overseas that happened, pretty much delaying the shows until January 21st, 2016, where the venue of choice ended up being Paisley Park. Did you guys have any discussions about that before?
No, not really. I got called back in November 9th, 2015. You know, it was every so often I would just get a call from Kirk and he would say, hey, he wants you to come out and talk. And so I went out there in the end of November and we started to work towards getting this New Year's Eve show in St. Bart's ready to go. He let me know what we were going to be doing. It was only after that New Year's Eve show in St. Bart's, or New Year's Day, I should say, it was the morning of New Year's 2016, that we started to focus on that, or that I learned of his intention whatsoever to go and do a piano show.
Right. So like while he started tweeting it, what are you guys doing on this date or whatnot? It's not, you were actually probably knowing at the same time the fans were that there was going to be an event.
Yeah. I learned probably along parallel with the fans. So I would show up at Paisley Park and Marone or Kirk would say, hey, he wants you to do this, or can you set this up? Or Prince would come to me and say, can you build a riser? And where do you think it'd be best? And I said, I don't know. I'd build one right here. And how much space do you need? Are you going to dance at all? And it just sort of like Itsy Bitsy Spider. We sort of kept building, and I didn't know the grand plan, but I knew he had something in mind for a solo show.
Now before, because Paisley was set up, you know, to where the stage is how it is now to the left, and then the piano moved to the right. When did that decision come to be where he's like, okay, since we're gonna have a smaller crowd, let's put the piano like behind the cymbal to the corridor that would lead into what would be the left another room, then the MPG-MC room. When did those decisions start getting made? Was it super close to January 21st?
Yes. Everything happened very quickly within a 2 or 3, 4 day period, we'll say. We knew the show was coming, but we didn't know how it would be laid out and which direction we would be facing and all that. And so it was only, I think, 3 or 4 days, maybe 3 days before the show that Prince said, can you build me a riser? And I said, sure, I can, we can whip one together, and just had to piece it together and decide the big stage. He said, no, I want to leave the big stage there. I don't want to go on the big stage. I want it to be intimate. He kept saying the word intimate. He wanted it intimate at all times. So I made I forget what it was. It was like 16 by 12 foot riser, if I remember right. I asked him if he wanted a ramp going up, and he said, no, I want the doors to be able to close. So it was just little technical back and forth conversations like that. I wanted it to be a ramp, to go down into the MPG room, but he said, no, I need the doors to open and close with a lot of smoke. And so I'm taking notes on that. And he said, it's fine. Having a stairway is fine.
Right.
And so I just sort of had it built within a half a day.
And then they changed it kind of like a week or two before to where it was hard flooring at Paisley to carpeting. I know that Kirk Johnson was one of the people in charge of doing all that.
Yeah.
It came about pretty quickly, right?
Kirk was instrumental in making all that happen very, very quickly. Like so many changes had to be done to the building, and Prince wanted everything obviously done as he thought of it. So Kirk he did a great job moving forward and getting all that done very, very quickly. So he had the entire soundstage emptied and carpeted in, oh man, it was probably a day and a half, maybe 2 days. It was very quick. We just had to get everything out of there so they could do that. And
for people that don't know, although we want to make sure of it, with Scottie has done stuff with Prince dating back to the 90s, first being Michael B's Bland's, drum tech, and then other stuff, correct? Just so people know.
Yeah, just for people that may not know, I was with Prince 90 to 94, so about 5 years as his drum tech on all the tours and shows, everything we did back then. Sitting behind Michael Bland, kind of learning Prince's style, learning what he liked, what he didn't like, watching him fire sound engineers along the way, dozens of them. And so I kind of learned how to work with Prince. That was my schooling on how to work with him. Then I left and started my sound career in 94 with Sheila E. And I went off to mix a whole bunch of big acts and would occasionally see Prince down at a club in Minneapolis called Bunkers. And I'd be mixing and he would come in and we'd talk. And we had a cordial relationship back then. And he knew I was very involved with the show and when I was with him as a drum tech. So he would come in, I'd say, hey, and we'd talk at Bunkers. And at one point he said, can you come out and EQ the system? Now we're all the way up to late 1999. And it was off and on. So I came out in 99 or 2000, I think, and re-EQ'd his system for him, talked him through sound. He had known where I had been and what I'd been mixing. He kept tabs on me. So he said, hey, do you want to start working together? I said, sure. So we started on what tour was that, Doc? 2000, 2001? The Hits? Was it the Hits?
Hit and Run tour.
Hit and Run tour, yeah. So then I was running sound. So really I ran sound off and on between 2000 and up until just before his death. So the hard period, I mean, the most concrete period was 2000 through 2004, early 2005. That period was really heavy. We did a lot of stuff in that amount of time. And then I went off and kept mixing other acts and kept building my resume. And I would do shows. I'd get a call. I'd go out to LA, do a party, go here and do this, go do an award show, go to do the Tonight Show. I would just do things for him. We had a very on and off because I was busy with my career. So we kind of intermingled back and forth our careers.
And when you're on tour, you can't really pick and choose what weather you're going to have. But of course, most acts will, tour during the spring and summer and other stuff. And you have here tour in LA in January. We've had a mixture of 80-degree weather in the last week, very windy in the 70s. With these shows in Minneapolis in January of 2016, I kept looking at the weather and it was points was 7 degrees. We had it to be to where it was around 19 degrees. The shows happened. Now, was that playing into any decision making at all stuff? Is that why maybe he gave a little bit more of an advance warning, like, hey, what are you guys doing on the 21st, like a week or two ahead, to make sure that people weren't going to get sticker shocked or whatever by the flights? Not only that, but the weather itself.
Well, the difficulty with that was we just had a building that the building itself didn't, nobody wants to, the building itself has a personality. And if you've been there, people who've been there, you kind of know it has its own soul or spirit, not to get too new age about it, but it does have a feeling, especially with him in it. That the building itself, I think, was not in a great state of hosting it just because of the weather itself. We had there was snow everywhere. There was ice everywhere. We knew that getting all the people to and from the building was going to be an issue. So there's a lot to deal with. It's not like summer where you can just roll up and hang out in the parking lot. I mean, it was freezing cold. And at one point, a couple of days before the show, Prince was walking around and showing me different things. He's like, can you look after this? Can you look after this? Can you see to that? I mean, what is that? And we walked through a little vestibule coming out of the MPG room into the soundstage. There's a small little vestibule with an exit onto the loading dock. And he saw the door wouldn't shut. It was like propped open somehow. It just didn't fully shut. And it was freezing. It was below zero. And he just turned and said, Scottie, really? And I said, yeah, I don't know, man. The building, there were little things, little idiosyncrasies with the building all the time. So the weather did play a big part in it. And I think he even mentioned the cold in the show. That, you know, thanks for braving the cold or something to that effect, because it was extremely cold for that whole week there.
Although there was a lot of love in the room, which provided a lot of warmth from him and from the fans. Although I just remember, like, out after the show, a lot of people taking photos outside of Paisley. Now at that time, it's probably around 15 degrees, but they got to get their photo. You can't take photos inside the venue, so they're taking it outside of Paisley Park, and it's just like the girls want to take the photos, and they're wearing less than us. They're still wearing the skirts and the stockings, and then it's just like, you know, I'm wearing a hoodie underneath the dress shirt or whatnot, and you have the little things that are in your pockets to keep you warm. And they kept wanting to take more photos. I'm like, it's like probably about 5 minutes. You got to get frostbite in there. I don't understand how the women do it, but kudos to them, because that weather was something else. And what's prevented me from going to Paisley before is when in January, he'd be hitting me up years prior. Hey, Doc, we got some new music for you to listen to, that either Julia or Karen would hit me up about. And I'd be like, that's great. Let me know when it's 70 degrees and I'll fly out there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Weather is a thing. I mean, especially if you're not from Minnesota, you're not ready for it. You don't know how to sort of prepare. And so it was, I salute all the fans that braved that weather to come out to that show. It was very special. And of course they won't forget it now. So
yeah. Craziness that went into it and knowing it. And I don't know if you were still around at that time, but it looked like we felt like, especially when we were hearing that he wanted to do another celebration, or he wanted to start doing like a residency at Paisley Park, although that's his studio. He basically wanted the fans to start coming to him.
Yes. Yeah.
It felt like this was a test. If they'll come in this cold weather, then if I do stuff in the summer when it's nice, you know, and you have maybe the humidity is a problem more so than the cold, that this is not going to be a problem for him to be able to sell out if he's just fans. That's what us was a test.
Well, Prince could very often curve the narrative to fit what he wanted to do. So he would quite often say, well, because of this, then this. And he always kind of made it seem like his reason. So, you know, I don't know as to whether or not he planned that or made that as a sort of a test run. I tend to think not, but I do know that he had talked about and wanted people to come to Paisley Park. He already had a venue. He had tasked me, I just remember this, by the way, he had tasked me he said, can you find out about stadium seats? And he said, you know, like you'd see at a track meet or something. And I said, sure, I can look into that. And so I priced a bunch of, you know, basically aluminum seats that you'd see at a, you know, a high school game or whatever. And it just didn't feel good, didn't fit I didn't want that idea to work, you know, clearly, because aluminum seats never, just from the sound perspective alone, I think that's what I put it on. I said, hey man, if we get any bass rumbling in here, it's just going to rattle this aluminum. You know what it does to lighting cans. We don't want it to rattle the seats. So I had my own way of deflecting it, but he certainly wanted to start to have performances at Paisley Park on a regular basis. That was the goal.
And of course, trying to think of the stadium seating or whatnot, it's like he was trying to be able to get more people inside Paisley Park, even though it was intimate shows. You know, the more people you get in there, the more money you make, especially if it is your venue, you know, which is understandable. Now, was there any other ideas that he was wanting to implement that you didn't think were a good idea or just couldn't happen, whether in that amount of time or in the future?
The only other thing that I was working on particularly intensely was I had an idea of wanting to, I still have all the paperwork from it, and showed him. And he said, all he said about it was like, that'd be cool, which was to have the main stage. If people don't know, you're going to have to sort of bear with this, but where Prince was, he was sort of where the love symbol door was. That was at a 90-degree angle from where the stage was. The big stage was on one side. And after the piano show, I gave him some plans and said, hey, what we should do is have this solo stage, the piano stage, stay there, have the big stage stay there, but then put the musicians all around the room. Put Kirk across the room on a I probably never even told you this, Doc. Put Kirk on a VIP riser across the room. Put Ida on her own VIP riser, so the fans could sit around Ida while she played. Put put Donna on a riser. Have everyone around the room. And then I told Prince that we could put a PA in the center of the room, and that it would hang in the center of the room, spherical PA, and that we wouldn't even need sound monitors. We wouldn't even need wedges. We would just, as soon as they play, it would go to the room, and Prince would use the piano riser and then a ramp down to a long ramp that went to the center of the room and had a round riser of only about 2 feet high in the center of the room. So he could play guitar down there, come up, play piano. And he liked the idea. When he looked at it, I had everybody's pedal board drawn out and I had all the plans mapped out. And the coolest part was I wanted to run sound from a different room in Paisley Park, in the power room. And what I was going to do there is just use studio monitors, run sound from that room, and be able to pump it out into the entire place at once. Prince was not a fan of seeing monitor engineers. He was not a fan of seeing people of a technical nature. He didn't want them in his purview. He didn't want them in his sight. When he saw technicians, he once said to me, they all look like something's about to go wrong. So that's why during the Paisley Park, the piano and a microphone performance, as you can see behind me, I set up my soundboard right here. It almost looks like, I took the photo from the spot where I was mixing. So this was my view. I was looking at the back of Prince over, below his right shoulder. And I just needed to look up at him. The reason I didn't set up on the other side over there, I guess, across the other side of the big door, was because when he was playing, he would look up and see me. And I didn't want me to be looking at him like something was going to go wrong. So there was a whole psychology to working with Prince, that I wanted him to remain always in a state of artistry, right? To remain artistic and not have the technical aspect of it in his sight or in his mind. And if he called me out on the PA, and said, turn it up, Scottie, or use me as a punctuation mark in the show, that was fine. But I just didn't want people to be seen. And all the different monitor engineers that were there in my tenure of running front of house sound for the audience. I think I counted once, there were 33 in all of monitor engineers to my being there myself. So that was a lot of people to go through. And I always told them, stay out of his sight. Don't look at him in a way that would say something's wrong. What do you need me to do? Just chill, just relax. He wants you to be relaxed. So that's why I was behind in the position where you see me. I was looking up at him up there.
And I appreciate you doing that to where people could see your vantage point in the piano, knowing that's a photo of it. That isn't him inside Paisley Park right now, but that's a photo of it. And speaking of Paisley Park, I do see some of your comments just about you wish that you could have seen these shows or whatnot, or that Prince would have been here longer. We all wish that. But another thing is that, he got it in your mind and in our minds that he wanted you guys to come to Paisley Park. Yes, we know it's a museum. You're not getting it being as much of a live venue as we want it to be. But they are getting that in place. Of course, what's going on in the world right now has kind of changed that a little bit. But, come to Paisley Park when it reopens, see the museum, see other things that are going on in there, because that's what he wanted, was for you guys to come to it. And they were doing tours, albeit differently. During that time, they even had tours during these shows throughout the weekend of January 23rd. So I just want people to know that and get that.
Yeah, he was active. He was active in making the place vibrant, and he had a plan for the place. It was his, not only his physically, his home, it was his house, but it was also this creative station. It was where it was his, Death Star sort of. It was where he did all his work and play, and not that there was much of that. So to make it to where he didn't have to travel to do it, why not have people? Why not just relax? And he would, when he was working with people that I had heard him say it a number of times to band members. Are you nervous? And they'd say, well, yeah. And he would say, no, we're just playing just like a big living room. He wanted you to think of the performance as a living room. And so I understood that. I was good at that. And I certainly had done clearly, I don't know how many people were there for that show, 1,500 or something, maybe 1,000. And I've done shows for 300,000 people and shows regularly for 50 to 90,000 people. So I've learned to not be nervous at any of them and let the creativity, if you're good enough, you can march right through that sort of thing. And he had a really nice, he warmed that place up a lot for these shows.
For sure. And that's what we're saying is because I know some people, yes, Paisley Park is reopened for tours. Some places in certain countries, they can't fly to the US right now, or they don't feel safe. When everyone feels safe and it really can be reopened, you have the performances there again, where there isn't social distancing. I know that Linka Paris, and we had her on the show before this happened, did a Paisley Park after dark, socially distanced, but they still have these things going on. So we're hoping that people that live locally in Minneapolis or live close by that can drive by can go there when they start doing bigger events. But when everything is open worldwide again, I want to make sure that you guys who may not have been there before or have been there before return, because he wanted you to be there. That's how I look at it. Someone saying Morris Hayes said that Prince told him if something goes wrong, don't bring attention to it, make it part of the show. Just basically backing up what you said.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Now, I mean, as passionate as he was about not making mistakes in your position, everyone makes mistakes, and he made bucket loads of them. And I can tell you this one, but it was about how you recovered from a mistake. It was how you obfuscated or made that mistake not apparent. And you can musically, you can do that. You can make a mistake twice or 4 times, and then it seems like part of the song, and that's a cute answer. But the real answer is just how well can you cover for not knowing a lyric? How well can you cover for missing your cue and not being in the right place when the lights go on there or whatever? And he, of course, was a master, and he was someone that we, as band members, and he'd refer to me all the time as a band member. You're that extra band member. Or he used to say, okay, band, we got to respect our 2 extra band members, Scottie and Silence. Mm-hmm. So he considered me a band member. He considered Silence a band member, which I think is a beautiful thought. I'd never heard any artist say that before, because it was all about the space between the notes and the dynamic and the silence in between. And he understood silence is where reverb lives, and silence is where these moments are. So he was quite aware of that extra band member as well.
Right, correct. The space between the notes was always something with him. And something I noticed, and someone asked this question, although we think Prince is perfect, I did notice, like during Anastasia, he did flub the words of love is God, God is love,
yes,
or God above. Flub that. Was there any other mistakes that you noticed? And if Prince is watching, sorry about this, that happened that we may not have noticed that night?
Well, I tend to think of it like this. I'm not specifically referring to the show, but I don't look at mistakes are part of what makes the experience sort of analog and beautiful. And you can perform it perfectly, but that doesn't mean the heart was in it. And conversely, you can have you can have mistakes in there, but it gives it more soul. So I don't really, I personally, I didn't notice any I didn't notice any big mistakes. I didn't look up from my position and say, whoa, what's he going to do now? I heard him hunting from key to key when he'd do a song, and I knew he had to get to a different song that was next on the set list. I went, I wonder how he's going to get there. Like, that's in F sharp and that's in C major, like, or how's he going to walk this up? And I would hear how he would get to the next thing. And that was sort of masterful. It wasn't maybe technically how you would do it if you attended Berkeley or Williams or something, but that's what made Prince Prince, is that he knew how to bend and morph the rules and make it his own. So I didn't notice any mistakes, to answer your question specifically. I didn't notice anything that was way out there that from which he had to recover.
Awesome. Now, a question that I find curious just when it comes to certain things, like we talked about the New Year's show and all this stuff. But when did he start telling you that, oh, the next show I'm going to do is no band, just myself, a piano and a microphone? When those discussions start happening?
What date you're saying?
I know it's like sometime in 2015 or whatnot, but when did it like start becoming more of a realization that this is going to happen? It's just going to be him.
Well, for me personally, I had my attention was really focused on the building. When we met November 9th or 10th, whenever I finished the tour, flew home from Las Vegas, Kirk called on the day of my last show, right after my last sound check with another band. And I thought, well, this is perfect. I can get, and he said, yeah, he wants to talk to you. Come on out tomorrow. So I went right from the airport to Paisley Park and talked to him. And he said, hey, I want to get the building in good shape. I want to prepare for the shows we have coming up. He didn't mention the piano show. He didn't mention anything specifically like that. So I probably learned not only in parallel and at the same time as the fans, but I sometimes learned things after they did, because I'm not as up on social and I'm not on Facebook. So I didn't sit there and, people around Paisley Park, we were very busy doing other things. So it's not like I had my finger on the pulse of what was going to be coming up, figuring I would find out through you or through another version of social media. I just figured I'd know when I needed to.
It was just crazy. It just reminds me of like Gucci when I first met him. Was all like, where we're going to be before I do. And then my wife knows before I know where I'm going to perform. So I found that weird. I'm seeing a bunch of people that I met that night for the first time. I see Michael D in the room. And then someone brought up this thing, and maybe Vanessa can do it, about the iPad kind of at one point, looking like it went into sleep mode. Vanessa, if you can handle it, because I know you were behind watching it. I know Prince kicked off the show kind of like saying something in a microphone, but if I remember correctly, it was like, my name is Marone or something like that from Marone Bakur, correct? Was that just testing stuff?
I don't know exactly what he was saying, but I was doing that effect on him. It's an echo effect that I had done on him in 2004 on the Musicology tour on the song Whole Lotta Love. He gave me free reign to always do any effects I wanted. He knew I would appropriately place them in the right time and be musical about it. So when he started doing Whole Lotta Love live on Musicology, I didn't just do the vocal echo. I did this echo where it echoed, but it went down. So he would sing something, and it would kind of go down. I did the same one that went up. So when we had this magical night on January 20th, where it was just Prince and me, he was at the piano and I was basically in the position you see me right now. I was over by the riser, about 8 feet behind where I appear to be right now. And right. We were talking, and he said, have you got something cool for the intro? And I said, yeah, let's do that effect from Musicology. And I said, check your mic. And he went, check 1, 2. I said, well, check it again. And he went, check 1, 2, check 1, 2, check 1, 2. And he said, yeah, let's do that. So he sort of came up with, I don't know what he was saying, frankly. I'd have to see a script of it or something and he just said, leave that effect on until I start playing the Batman theme. So the 20th was really, I know this isn't I'm taking this a different direction, but January 20th was a really magical night. I say magical because we had 3 or more uninterrupted hours of just rehearsing the show. He said, can we rehearse the show? I said, sure. So knowing the psychology of how it all works, he said, do you want to come up and take notes on the piano? And I said, no, man, I'll just stay down here on the riser. And I had my 3-ring binder that's out, never leaves my side. I had that laying in front of him so he could see the notes that I was taking. All he had to do was look down and to his right. And I also had an iPad to control my soundboard. The reason I didn't want to go up on the riser and set all my shit up on his piano, I'm not going to set a cup of tea and all my notebooks sitting next to him. He would have been comfortable with that. He invited me up there, but you understand the psychology of it is, listen, I want to be transparent. I want you to know on what I'm taking notes and ideas like that. Plus I can get over to my soundboard if I need to while we're discussing this. So in that 3 hours, we talked about friends that we had and people along the way. And we talked about, but nowhere in that. So we discussed some of the effects. I said, hey, do you want Purple Rain? Do you want it to have the echo? Do you want something in the water? There's a vocal echo on there. Do you want that to match? He said, yeah, just do whatever you want. You'll know what to do. I said, great. And at some point in there, we discussed all the different songs and what he might do, but I did not see the autobiographical nature of the show coming to light. I didn't recognize that it was going to be autobiographical. I thought he was just going to play a solo piano show. I knew the gravity of the show. I knew he had never performed at Paisley Park alone. I knew it was the first time really in his career that he, unless I'm wrong, that he had done a whole show alone, unless you say differently. So I knew about that. That's not, but I did not see the autobiographical nature coming. So when he started, when I did the echo on him and he started to do the Batman theme and I turned the echo off and we went into the show, he started talking. He was super talkative and he was talking about his dad and learning to play the piano. And then I understood after about a song and a half, like, oh, he's going to talk through this whole thing interstitially and change keys and use the iPad, which gets back to Nessa, her comment, is that iPad on top of the piano. A lot of people think that controlled the strings. A lot of people think that controlled different things. It was just a big iPad running an app called OnSong. And all OnSong does is you can do lyrics and you can make them white writing on black and you can scroll along. And, you know, it's just an app you can buy and sort of have the lyrics. So he would, anytime he was scrolling like this, he was just looking for the next song to do. And he skipped some songs. Even in the set list, he went back to other songs. So he was kind of scrolling along. Those were just sort of cheat notes so he could see the lyrics that he wanted to see. It was nothing more magical than that. He had his motif, his Yamaha motif 8 that we carried around the world with all the samples in it. He had that and he could control the amount of strings that were behind the piano and that was for sustain. And that's a very musical decision to make, to ride strings into your piano sound. So there was a reason, he had a reason for doing everything he did.
Correct. And someone's asking this just so get out of the question, probably a bootlegger, but they want to know if that rehearsal was recorded, if you know.
No, rehearsals were never recorded unless he asked me to record them. I was always ready to record them. And I was always basically in record and pause mode. It was sometime it was either 2002 or 2004, I believe. No, it was 2002. He and the band were jamming a One Night Alone live on the tour. And he and the band were jamming. And at the end of the jam, he said, "Oh, Scottie, I hope you recorded that." And we were, 100 feet apart. So I shook my head, no. And he said, "Oh, you're fired." And I said, "Oh, that's it, man." And so not letting him get away with that comment, I jogged up to the stage and jumped up on the stage. And I went right up to him and I said, "Hey man, if you want me to record, just say my name and then nod upward and I'll start the recording right on the one. I'll start to record. But if not, I'm not going to record things thinking you want them." So I kind of had to lay it down there so that we had some sort of protocol because we had no protocol in place there. So we'd be and right after, of course, the next day he tested it there in the middle of a jam. He went, "Scottie." And then I looked at him, he went like that. So I started recording and faded up right on the one. It was like Days of Wild or some song. And so sound checks were never recorded. That wasn't even really a sound check the night before on January 20th. That was more just like a football play. I'm going to go here. You hit me there. I'm going to do this. Can you do that effect? I'm going to, we talked things out, talked about people in his career. And, it was just a rambling sort of 3 hours where we kind of got it all in. I didn't see the layout of it until the next day.
Very cool on that one. Now, is there any songs that you guys did a rehearsal or you were hoping that he was going to do during the show that he may have passed? Was there anything that you were like, "Oh man, I can't wait for them to hear this"?
I didn't think of it like that. I had a certain level of, I had to carry a certain level of disconnection with the material or what was going to be played. Only in so much as I didn't need to care about what was going to be played. I just had to work on and worry about what was being played at the time. So on that show specifically, it was really him, his foot. I had his foot mic'd so that he could stomp and I could put that in the PA if I wanted for some percussion. I didn't have to make any big moves. on that show. Just sort of write effects and make sure that it sounded great in the room, which was a challenge, and I kind of conquered that challenge along with Kirk's help. And so it wasn't like I was looking for certain material or saying, oh, I hope he plays this song. I couldn't be a fan in that sense. I hope fans understand that I had to remain objective in a certain way and just say, well, I know what to do if he plays this, or I know when he's going to go into Purple Rain because I can hear B flat coming. So I just knew I could go wherever he went, and it was about keeping up with him in the moment. So, but I didn't wish and want and say, oh, joy, he's going to play, he's going to play this song, or he's going to play Anastasia or something like that. I didn't think like that.
Right.
That didn't help me to think like that.
Okay. I was just curious on that one. This question comes from YouTube, although it isn't pertaining fully onto it, but I want to make sure that people see that we see all their questions, or just highlighting it for both platforms. Given the many years you and worked together with Prince, what's the best advice he ever shared with you?
So much, Don. There's so many. I was always listening. I was always present. I got incomparably. I had notebooks like full of little sayings that he would say, and I would just jot them down. And I was like a reporter in front of him. I always asked, can I keep this? Can I write that? Can I take notes? And he would kind of nod. And so he would say stuff and I would write it down. Some of the best advice, there's a few, but more than anything, he was a huge proponent of ownership. I think that showed in his career and his material as well. But he wanted you to own your responsibility, and he would remind me, you're the owner, or you're the producer. He would say, I don't know, you're the producer. Produce. He said this for the show, the January 21st show, both shows. He said, I said, well, do you want me to do this? He said, I don't know, you're the producer. What would you do? And I said, well, I would probably do this. So he was always sort of teaching, and he didn't take the time to teach the people he knew weren't receptive or didn't have their, have their antennas out and really were listening and paying close attention. Because things I learned with Prince, I'd like to think I gave him good advice in return. I was always candid with him, even to the point where it sometimes hurt me, where I would say something that would sort of go against me. I would like to think that he got plenty from me as well, but in candor and honesty. But he always knew that I was paying attention. So to not, maybe it doesn't answer Don's question very specifically, but it was that he always had little nuggets of wisdom. You just had to sort of be open and receptive to taking him in. I got good advice from him all the time.
Yes. Now, just for people that were there and weren't there, I'm going to go through some of the songs that he played from show 1 to show 2.
Mm-hmm.
Show 1 you had, and we'll go through this a little bit more descriptive later on and break everything down. But you had, when he was talking and doing other stuff, but this is basically just a set list. You had the Batman theme.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at it now, just so you see why I'm looking off screen. I'm looking at the
whenever I'm looking off screen, hopefully people know I'm looking at the comments or other stuff to bring on. It's not being rude to my guest or trying to. We have the Batman theme, Who's Loving You, Baby, I Want to Be Clever, Dirty Mind, Do Me Baby, Some of the Water Does Not Compute. These are my notes, because sometimes with the Setlist FM or whatnot, it's not going to get everything. Free, A Case of You, Motherless Child, The Beautiful Ones, You're Gonna See Me, How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore, just the intro only, Of the Heart, Venus de Milo, Raspberry Beret, Paisley Park, Sometimes It Snows in April, I Love You But I Don't Trust You Anymore, and of course, The Ballad of Dorothy Parker, Unchain My Heart, Baltimore, Rock and Roll Love Affair, Starfish and Coffee, The Breakdown, Anastasia. And that was show 1.
Yes.
With show 2, we had, these are different notes, Wow, Love We Make, Look at Me, Look at You, The Question of You, 1,000 Hugs and Kisses, You're Gonna See Me, Call My Name, Purple Rain, The Dance, Te Amo Corazon, A Million Days, Nothing Compares to You, How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore, The Ladder, I Want to Be Your Lover, Raspberry Ray, Starfish and Coffee, Venus de Milo, Sometimes It Snows in April on show 2 as well, Dear Mr. Man, A KCU, and the encore consisted of Kiss, Black Sweat, and Free Yourself with Prince walking off the stage. Wow. Now, I know that show 1 was a little bit more autobiographical than show 2. And as you said, you didn't expect him to have it be autobiographical. Was there, you think, maybe a point where Prince for show 2 was trying not to do the exact same thing he did in show 1?
That's a very good, very adroit point. And I picked up on that night as well. Probably in the middle of show 2, I went, oh, okay, he's not going to go all the way he really had the hammer down on the first show of that. And he didn't like to repeat himself in his career and in his music and performance. And so, and that could have been, I don't have an end to the psychology. Prince and I didn't discuss that. But possibly he could have made that decision on the fly to not make it so autobiographical.
It seemed like, and especially during show 2, like he apologized for too many sad songs in a row right after doing like Nothing Compares to You, and was, I think it was flipping through the iPad trying to look for something a little more upbeat, but the shows to me were amazing in both of them. And someone asked a question I saw earlier about some of the song titles that were on the piano. Is that something that Prince had put himself, or how did that come to be where some certain song titles were chosen that were on the piano top? And
I don't know. I don't recall. You mean not on the iPad, you're saying?
On the iPad. It was like etched into the piano, certain stuff.
Oh, I didn't either notice that, or that's something that got by me.
Yeah, someone may bring that up later or do anything else. And then just another question has to do just with specifics. Can you ask him, did Prince ever learn how to use a digital desk, or did he stop at analog desk? Well,
there's that, digital analog fight that Prince and I went through famously or infamously and many times. I knew that I had a preference for using digital desks. And remember, with my age and when I started in the industry, it was all analog. So I was someone who started all analog and ended, or had, when the virus started, I'm all on digital now. So I see the advantages of both worlds. Prince loved analog desks. He said, you need to put electricity through the desk and turn all the faders all the way up. Well, I know you don't have to be a physicist or Neil deGrasse Tyson to figure out that doesn't work. It's not going to sound good. So I had to explain in ways that Prince would understand that just wouldn't work. And I want to give, after all, my job is to be a representative of the way the music gets to the fans. I've never not thought about that at any concert I've ever mixed in my career, that I'm here on behalf of the fans. How would they want to hear it? And I put myself in their shoes, and I walk the venues, and I make sure that it sounds good everywhere. I've always taken great pride in that. And I've never, I've never faltered or gone away from that architectural tenet. So that's easy for me. But I knew that it would be best done in digital because I had to track this. I had to multi-track this show so it could be mixed in the studio. Because he just said the night before to me, he said, "You're recording this in multi-track, right?" I said, "Yep, absolutely." Well, had any other engineer been there, they wouldn't have put up a fight and got the desk they wanted. They would have used what was at Paisley Park, and they would have been in panic management mode and been trying to figure out how they were going to record this the night before it happened. I had already recorded it. I recorded it on my big old 17-inch MacBook that I still have that doesn't work anymore. It died, but I have that, and I have the drive that I originally recorded it on. And that was very easy for me. It was one cable to do that, knowing that I was creating a digital asset that could be released later for him. I had to have that sort of forethought. And with him, it was like, well, how are you going to translate that energy in the room? Come on, Scottie, think about it. Muscle Shoals, and I said, what are you talking about? James Brown, you got to get energy through the desk. And I thought, well, and so all I said to him when we finally had one, I think we had a disagreement about it years previous on a show in Los Angeles at one of the houses. He said, "You using digital?" And I said, "Yeah, man." And he said, "You should be using analog." And I said, listen, I don't tell you what guitar to play on what songs. This is my instrument. This is what I prefer. And it sounds great. And he said, well, you could though. And I said, yeah. So he suggesting that I could tell him what guitar would be better on what song. I would never do that. That's him. That's his artistry.
Right.
I gave him enough resistance to not create a big deal between us, but just enough to get what I wanted, and knowing that it would be best for the enjoyment of the crowd. Because doing the sound in the soundstage in quad was not the preferred way to do it. I made it work, and I think we got to a reasonable result in there. But it was not without a fight. We had tried several things in the days prior, and I had to kind of show him and walk him through how this way wasn't going to work. And so we got it to somewhere where we agreed to lower the PA and put it in on the corners, but have it only 9 feet high instead of all the way up in the corners. And when we did do a test, in case this is of interest to people, I've never talked about this before, I hung the PA in the center of the room facing out, all, 4 big stacks going out, all kind of the bottoms banging together, just so it was spitting out the sound all over the room. He came in, saw that, said, oh, And I said, all right, man. And so we had the PA dropped and put in the corners of the room. And he said, I want it up in the far corners. So when he came in the next night, there were candles lit, and he had Tidal playing the new record and everything. And when I got there, he said, meet me at 10. I think came back at 10. He was already there. I came back at 9:30. He was already in the room, standing in the center. And I walked over to him and kind of came up next to him and stood there, and he said, sounds great, right? And I said, yeah, it sounds great right here. Now, I said, come on over here. And I made him walk about 3 meters to the, just a little bit toward one of the corners. And he said, well, now it's coming from up there. And I said, exactly. So unless you're in the center of the room, it's not going to sound great, except for if you're in the center of the room. I have to make sure everybody in the room, it sounds good to all of them. So the medium thing we found was to lower the PA, the speakers, and keep them in all 4 corners.
Yeah, cool. Now, just because I saw someone who was asking the question if you had them test from different things. Another question I see was, were you ever afraid that digital storage will become corrupted and inaccessible?
No. In general, or specifically with prints? No. Digitals are all ones and zeros. And once you store it, and once it got to, in Prince's case, to Iron Mountain, it's well taken care of. And it's going to be in better shape than analog stuff is. They probably had to do CPR to Piano A Microphone 83. Wasn't that the title of it? And it still had a bunch of hiss. I don't think they did everything they could to make that as I think they did everything they could within reason. But you got the gist of it. And some of that, I don't, believe it or not, I don't always lobby for pure audio purity. I'm not an audio purist that said we have to run at the highest resolution possible. I can't have any hiss. I can't have any of this. I go for musical purity. Let's make sure the band is tight. Let's make sure the microphones are in the right place. And then what happens out front is largely a result of my listening to it and making adjustments. But no, analog it's just by the nature of the being, it's going to degrade over time, where digital will remain over time. And really, that isn't the question. That's the wrong question. The question is the analog versus digital question. That's not the question. The question is the music great? Is what's on either analog or digital great? Because most songs now suck. Most pop songs suck. It doesn't matter that they're digital or cut on analog. Mm-hmm. It's just a lot of sugary candy songs. So it doesn't matter how well it's recorded or mixed. The soul isn't there. The depth isn't there. Now, I'm not saying we have to go back to all Journey and Bachman Turner Overdrive or Cher. I'm just saying in the 70s, I'm just saying that it's more important what was coming through, and specifically referring to January 21st, 2016, all the soul in the world was being poured into this performance, and anybody in that room if it didn't change them forever, I would be surprised.
Interesting. And of course, one day these shows will be released because there is, video of it, multi-camera,
Yeah.
and the sound, which we all know
Yeah.
would sound amazing. We just don't know when, and coming back to Piano 83, I remember even my designer at the time, she was able to mess with the audio where you're not hearing the hissing as much. But I think they kind of wanted that, so you knew it was a good tape. Of course, I was critical of that release, and that probably because I feel that, I'm coming from a place where I'm being critical or doing criticism, not to be a jerk, but to help the process. And of course, that probably cost me a way in to help, which sucks. But I just feel, as I said before, if Prince allowed me to be critical when he was here, when a lot of people didn't, that I should be allowed to be critical of other things. I want the best. That's all it comes down to. That's what it comes doing to it. But eventually we will get, a full 2016 Piano Microphone show from Paisley Park.
Sure.
It's a matter of when. And of course, like I'm saying, is what it's worth right now, they wouldn't get what it's worth. That people
I
want,
agree.
but we need more people to know it. I want to, I'm constantly talking about trying to get his hands into the younger generation and younger fans. We all want to see this release. I guess my whole thing is not selfishly, but wanting it to have the biggest audience, because Prince will be sitting on it unless the price was right. And right now, as I said so many times before, it's a broken record that someone's probably flipping off the screen right now. But the money is in the merchandise more than the music, unfortunately, for the time.
Well, and also you got to understand that the people, whether they're, the bank running things or the estate or the people who are on a day-to-day basis making decisions, they can only do what they can do. You don't want to have, they're doing the right things. And besides that, I look at it this way. Yeah, it will come out eventually. But the sort of waiting for it, there's an excitement to waiting for it. It would be unfair to tease people and say, yeah, we're going to release it, and then just make them wait 4 or 5 or 7 years for it. You want to let it run its course. There are other things to release in due time. I would love for it to be released not only because I think it's an important part of the canon of his work. It happened near the end of his life. It was autobiographical. It was his first solo performance. It was his first performance at Paisley Park solo. There are so many, and I was intimately involved. It was Prince playing and me mixing, and that was it. And then the people in the room. Of course, I have a big reason for wanting it. And he thanked me in the middle of the show, which is a big deal, because when someone thanks you, it's one thing on a liner notes or something. When Prince said whatever he said, does it sound good? Thanks, Scottie, show your love to Scottie, or whatever he said, it was inserted into his art. He was playing while he said that. And that's a very different position, because then you're inserted into the artwork. And so, of course, I want to see that release. It's important, but it's not so important to me that I demand that it be released. It's all good things in time. And people will really appreciate it whenever it does come out. It's in good hands. I think that's the thing to take out of it, is that it's in good hands, and it'll come out in time, and I'll look forward to it as much as anyone else, because it's a marker of, it was certainly the most special show that I'd seen. Hundreds and hundreds of Prince shows. And it was the most special performance I'd ever seen out of him. So I know what the world will think of it when it does come out.
100%. We just got to make sure it gets that audience it deserves and the attention it deserves.
Yeah.
And right now, I'm not sure that the promotional side of stuff is where it needs to be. And if they're, open to criticism or open to ideas that will branch out the audience. Like, I'm a big fan of the box sets, but I'm a hardcore fan.
Mm-hmm.
To get the younger generation that it's not priced out of their hands, especially with the vinyl resurgence of things, and we talked about that, when we have our conversations, people don't know it's like usually longer than some of our shows.
Yeah.
Someone was asking, are you a fan of vinyl? I'm just glad that the younger generation is becoming a fan of it, because that's a way that the music does create revenue again. But are you a fan of vinyl releases?
Well, I don't collect vinyl myself, and I don't. Again, my default answer for any of that stuff would be, I'm a fan of the music. I'm a fan of the way in which the shuttle that gets me to hear the music is unimportant to me. I said on Michael Dean's show a while back. He asked me, are you an audiophile? Do you listen to high fidelity stuff? And I said, hey, sometimes when I'm on a long driving trip by myself, I turn on AM radio. I'll turn on a ball game that I can get from Kansas City. I'll turn on anything on AM radio. I'll listen to something specifically because it's lo-fi, because that harkens back to my youth, right? It's all about connection to what brings us to the emotive state of listening to and taking in that music. So I don't necessarily believe that it has to be vinyl, or it has to be analog, or it has to be digital, or MP3s, or FLAC files. None of that interests me. It's all about the content. And if the content's right, the shuttle that gets you that content is unimportant. It becomes extremely unimportant. Because I listened to Piano A Microphone 83. I know there was some controversy about how it was, the title, the naming of it, and the title and whatever. But I listened to it. I really enjoyed it. I probably got emotional once or twice listening to it because I just thought it was so intimate. It was beautiful to hear Prince in that setting. So I don't get rattled about that stuff. I have other things to think about other than my own list of demands that I want. That doesn't concern me.
I understand that especially. But here's hoping. I think sometimes that the reason that they call it Piano Microphone 83 was for copyright purposes, knowing that there'll be a Piano Microphone 2016. So some of those things that we talked about. Someone wants to know, I know we touched base on this before in other shows, so your answer going to be whatever length that you want to be. They want to know how you met Prince, how you got started with Prince.
First time I laid eyes on him, it was at the Fine Line. I heard that he used to show up there on Wednesdays to watch Dr. Mamo's Combo, a band in town. And he was scouting Michael, or had already scouted him for his band to join, and he joined in 90. And I believe it was sometime in late 89 or early 90 that I showed up there, and I went to go upstairs. It wasn't roped off. I went to go upstairs. I came around the corner, and Prince was at the top of the stairs and just sort of looked me back down. And I sort of stepped back in my tracks because it's, we all kind of remember the first time we saw Prince. And that was, I wasn't a super fan of Prince. He, as I've said before, he sort of provided a soundtrack to my life as a teenager, or as a, in Minneapolis. You just couldn't go anywhere without hearing Prince or hearing about him. But I thought, oh, cool. There he is. He's in the room. I'm in the room with him because he has that mystique about him. But it wasn't until I started showing up out at setting up Michael's drums for a band that Michael was in, an offshoot band that Prince started called MC Flash. And Prince watched the way I worked with Michael, and at some point said, "Is your guy cool?" And Michael was like, "Oh, absolutely." And he said he should probably come on the road with us. So it was me I was contracted by Michael, and I was at Paisley Park in the soundstage as Michael's technician, not Prince. So Prince watched me and at some point decided I had the right stuff, and he knew. And that led to 5 years of touring. That was great for me because Michael hits so hard and breaks so much stuff, used to, that I would have to be on stage, literally hiding behind a monitor. And when things would break, I'd jump up and fix them. So I had really the greatest seat in the venue to watch Prince. I'd watch him come on stage toward me and turn and go up on stage. He'd come from behind me and make these entrances on stage. And I had, even if I can anecdotally tell you this, he was mad at me for something. I did something and he was mad at me. And so what I did is, as sort of my olive branch reaching out to him, I drew a dead chalk outline of myself. I had another technician draw me laying like I was a dead man, and he drew chalk around me, and then I put R.I.P. Scottie. And then it kind of hid. So when Prince came on to do a song, he looked down at the floor and he just burst out laughing. He just stopped in his tracks and was laughing. And I was probably hiding behind a monitor to see his, and after the show, I got called over and he said, and that was cool. So getting a "that was cool" from Prince back then, it was sort of it was just a weird way of sort of extending an olive branch to him. and making him laugh. And I was one of his favorite technicians because I knew my gig and I was very attentive to what I had to do. So much so that he put me in charge of listening to certain things or to making sure things were how he liked them. So it was easy for me.
Awesome. And of course, that went on for a super long time. You ever, this is just a question, because that probably saved you from getting fined that night, but did you ever get fined? I know you fined musicians.
No, I never got fined. I never had to pay the cuss jar, although I cussed sort of at him once in one of our little spats. As he did me, when there was no swearing in the building. So I just never got fined. And I was challenged a couple of times, but I would like to think that he did. He knew I would always stand my ground, no matter who or what it might hurt, whether that was myself or an audience member or Prince. I was usually on the side of the audience, but I would call it like I saw it. I mean, I wasn't built that way to sort of cower and hope that I was off the menu for who was going to get fired. I didn't operate that way. It's still anathema to me. I don't exist like that. So I just did my thing. I knew what I was doing. And it got so comfortable to the point where, like, for example, in 2002, they were rehearsing the song Party Up and in the MPG room. And I was back there at the soundboard, and they were just jamming on the riff, on the main hook. And Prince came out to the soundboard and it was so loud. He loved rehearsals loud. So I had it super loud. So I had to quick write down horn line to Party Man. I just wrote horn line to Party Man ? And I showed it to him and he was like, cool. And so he jogged up onto the stage to his keyboard position and over Party Up just went, and he started playing that and just pointed out in front of house. So we had a relationship where I was, we'll say, comfortable with tactful suggestions that I knew were good ones that he could utilize later. I was pretty good at not giving him suggestions he couldn't use.
Very, very
if
cool.
That makes any sense.
And I want to get back to the January 21st show. There's that. I'll get to my review or notes and I want you to interject on it. But I want to, I know it was discussed beforehand about, he wanted to say something about David Bowie, and by all means you could do your Prince voice if you want to, but how did that come to be for some people who may not have heard the story about Bowie? And this is before he started playing Heroes in the set later on.
That's right. I think Bowie had died just maybe a couple of weeks earlier than the show. And as we were talking January 20th, the night before the show, and I was next to him right there, kind of, just back there at the foot of the riser, and he was up on the piano there. And he said, okay, right here in the show, I'm going to say something about David Bowie. And I made a note like Bowie ? Or something. And he said, I would play one of his songs, but I don't know any. And he said, but I'll say something about him. And I'm not going to try and pay tribute to him. Let all the other artists do tributes to him. So I kind of knew how he felt right then about tributes. Wasn't very big into it.
Right.
But he's not around to make those decisions anymore. So you have to respect the people that do make those decisions. But he did say, I might play one of his songs. I don't know any, but I'll say something about him. And I, let other people do tributes to him. So he did mention, I think he said, I don't recall exactly what he said about him. I think he said something like he was nice to me or something like that. It was something close to that. Very short and sweet.
Yeah. Just that, I met him one time, he was really nice to me. I hear he was nice to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's right. It was sweet. It was a kind of a tender moment because it was sort of a forecast, although we weren't able to see it then. It is how you'd like to be regarded. He was nice to me. He seemed like he was nice to everyone. So I thought that was a kind of a tender moment in the show.
Right. And it's just, because he said a lot of stuff during that show. And of course, later on, that was brought up to me on interviews that I did just about, where he's been dreaming a lot lately and having lucid dreams and seeing people that are no longer here, and he's happy. And people are like, do you think that was a foreshadowing of what was to come? And it's like, now, of course, if we're playing Monday morning quarterback, you know, we can think of certain stuff in that show or certain things that were going on, especially now, you know, less than a month later around then you had Denise Matthews passing away.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is you can play, you'll never get a definitive answer to that. So you can't really know those things. And I call it it's my horoscope theory. You know, you look at your horoscope and say, oh yeah, that did happen today. Oh yeah, I did feel like that. And you can sort of read into it. I don't know if there's anything, you know, he was kind of an ethereal guy. So there were a lot of times where he would just speak ethereally. His theories were quite often very ethereal, and the way he would describe things and talk about them. And so it was, I think the people that worked with him had to get good at being translators of what he was saying and how he was saying it. Sometimes very direct and very pointed, and other times it was more of it lived in sort of the ether, and you sort of had to you had to transcribe and sort of figure out what he was saying. You had to
100%. And then another thing is, just although they were not similar artists, we obviously, him talking about him, there was a show of respect. I remember an article in 1990 that was written in the LA Times, because Bowie was taking on this thing where he wasn't going to be doing his old material anymore after that tour. And then they were talking about artists that should take that on. And at that time, Prince is 12 years in the business, but he was number one by the writer by saying that Prince changes so often that he should be the one that draws a line in the sand soon, to where he'll say he doesn't do the old stuff anymore. And of course, that did happen a few years later with the symbol, you know, with him changing the name of the symbol and saying he's no longer going to be doing any of Prince's stuff, and then would do Gold Experience songs. I just found that interesting that, you know, not a lot of people compare Bowie or Prince. Prince will get more comparisons to different people, so to speak. But there was this thing of where the artistry was there on different levels. For him to be compared to Bowie and understand that, and possibly be affected in a way that he probably wasn't affected with another person passing away since Michael Jackson in 2009. I just thought that was interesting, even though, as he even said to you at that time, even though he did Heroes later on, he didn't know any of Bowie's songs to play them right offhand.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting.
Yeah. And you know, one thing that hasn't really, I just thought of this as you're bringing up a point, that the worst thing in all of this, to me, is that we know that Prince is not in the world. Like, that's a hard thing for people to swallow. No matter what, it's that you can have release after release. You can release originals too. You can release box sets and the Piano and Microphone show, and you can do all this. But you know he'll never walk through those doors into the soundstage again. You know he'll never be in Studio A, hole up in there for a week by himself. Just bring me tea and a little bit to eat. You know, that's the saddest part for a lot of people. That is the hard reality that people have to face, is that he won't appear. He'll never appear, and he'll never do a live. For an artist that was predominantly known through the ups and downs of his material, because we know all the material wasn't A+ material. There's a lot of filler in there too. You just have to be honest and pick the songs that weren't. And through all of those ups and downs, one thing he always did well was perform live. Because you don't go out and play your C- material live. You play all the good stuff. And it's funny how all the people who say, oh, I'm retired my hits, I'm not playing those hits anymore, they always come back to them, because that's that's what brings in the cash. I was very, I don't know if it's in my nature to, well, my blink moment is to say that I was proud of him for the tour in 2002 when he played not a lot of hits. We did a lot of songs on there. I think he eked a couple in as we moved along there, but he really tried to do something different in 2002, and that was to his credit. What do you think?
Well, you know how I feel about the One Night Alone tour, that this is coming at a time where the press really wasn't being too kind to Prince. That he could do wrong. that, you know, he wasn't getting the cover of Rolling Stone anymore. As they said in 98, you know, yeah, he's like Jordan. He'll make the last shot, but he's not the same player he was at 25. Wanted the cover if you're going to do an interview, and they wouldn't give it to him. And then there was other worse comments that were made about him. So in order for him to do a tour like that of an album that wasn't exactly perceived well, not exactly by the fan community of the Rainbow Children, and make it call it One Night Alone. But when I saw that tour multiple times, when I saw it in LA, that this guy has so much talent, for him to be talked about the way he is and dismissed because of how many bridges he has burned over the years, you know, and that's probably what played into him not getting a lot of Grammys back in the 80s and other stuff, is just he wouldn't play the game. It's like, no, you got to play it my way. I'm not going to do it that way. But with that tour, I felt that was the setup for musicology.
Absolutely.
How talented it was. And I had an argument with someone in 2003 that Prince is going to be selling out the Staples Center. He's not going to be playing these small 5,000 venues. And they thought I was crazy. And I went, not only is he going to sell out the Staples Center, he's going to do it multiple times. And they're like, well, how? And I went, next year is the perfect storm. 2004, 20th anniversary of Purple Rain. He's going to be a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he'll be a nominee. He'll probably get inducted his first time. You have a Grammy performance. That's all you need, is one big performance, and you can have a tour right after that.
Yeah.
What did he do? It was a week after the Super Bowl where Janet Jackson and, her nipple made an appearance because of Justin Timberlake. And then a week later, the next person that performed after that scandal was Prince and Beyonce to kick off the Grammys. And he took a little bit of Beyonce's shine that she had that night and put it on himself. And the next day when you woke up, there was Prince on the cover of the LA Times, the New York Times, USA Today, Hollywood Reporter, Variety. It was all about him. The perfect storm. And then he sold out Staples Center, I believe, that year 7 times. But without that One Night Alone tour to show the musicianship, and so many of the people that were in that One Night Alone band ended up being in the musicology band, aside from adding Chance Howard into the mix and then more of a horn section. And sometimes you would get, you know, Candy Dolfer. You know, mostly for it, you did get a lot of Kenny Dolfer, and it was only Mike Phillips who got added for musicology, who wasn't there for the entire tour. But yeah, that tour from 2002 was immensely important and set up musicology, in my opinion. So.
Well, to underestimate Prince's ability to bounce back is a very big mistake. A lot of it, I think, or some of it anyway, was driven by that book that said, it was called like the rise and fall of Prince or something, right? There was a book, something like that. Was that the title or something? We won't have to name the author, but all that does is just, he would create his own competition between bands, between opening act bands, between band members within his own band. He knew how to be the Miller Lite guy. You know, he would lean over to one person and said, well, she said it tastes great, and they said it's less filling. He could start these little competitions. He loved competition. And so for him, it was just a competition. He knew how to get up there again. And I think people who sold him short or didn't think he had it in him severely underestimated his, and any good, you know, here's another thing, any good architect who does architecture for a living, they know, I've said this before, they know how to compress you and release you within a certain volume of space. They know how to sometimes put you in a small place so that when you come out somewhere else, your spirit feels different. Prince was a master architect in that sense. He knew when to go small so that when he went big, it seemed that much bigger. And I could tell it in the way he arranged music live. I could tell when he was kind of on cruise control and not trying hard enough. I could tell when he was really working hard. He worked very, very diligently in 2000 on the One Night Alone tour, very hard at how to make that flow happen without all the hits. That was a real masterpiece of a tour. I was really glad to be part of that, and especially to have a box set come out of it, straight off my soundboard. I mean, who does that? That was a huge thing, and it was a big setup for the success of musicology and that huge year he had. What a big year in 2004.
Quite successful. So we have this question, and of course, like I said, I love it that we're bringing it back to January 21st, 2016. I wouldn't use the word debrief. Did you and Prince have conversations regarding the gala event shows, like maybe between the first and second show or after the second show or at some point that weekend? I'm just curious if there was some talk, some feedback that he had between the shows, and then if there was discussions afterwards.
No, that's a good, Mike, that's a good question. No, we never talked about how the show went. Great show, good job. None of that. I mean, I got my thank you during the first show, and then he was on to the next thing. I knew that he didn't lay around in that, and he didn't celebrate too long before he was on to the next thing. I knew he wanted to get it mixed quickly. That's why he had John Gass there, great studio engineer. John literally ran the other smoke machine with me to get the smoke behind the door. So when the doors open, there was smoke. And I was Dr. Octopus at that point. I was mixing, I was getting him ready. I was playing the music. I had to fade the music. I had to start the smoke machine. All these things had to happen at the same time. Kirk and I did a lot of running around those couple of days. But for that show, it was really about the next thing. He was on to the next thing, and he quite quickly he wanted to take it on the road. The only debrief we got, to be specific about Mike's question, is that he quite obviously felt it was successful because he wanted to take it on the road right away. So that's why we ended up pointing ship toward Australia to go there and do it. I don't know why he felt Australia. I didn't need to know why. Well, there's that, but
the money.
And I just need to, I don't get too far into the business. I really need to know the H's and W's, the holy grail of business, how much, when, and where. And I apologize if that sounds distant, but I don't need to know the whys and wherefores, just the how much, when, and where. Like, where are we going? What are we doing? How much, how big is the venue? What do I need to do? Give me the freedom to make what I do a success. That'll translate into a success for you. And we had, of course, after the 21st, we had great success in Australia, both financially and in the shows and the reviews of the shows. But it was, for me, there was a disconnect with how he was towards me during that couple of weeks over there. And that ultimately led me to make the decision to leave, to just say, well, I can go back and work with all these people at this great project I had going in LA before this all came about, the Australia thing. So I just thought, well, I'll just go back to that. So it was quite easy for me to make a decision based on my own best interests. I'm not like, technicians are not like musicians in a sense that we don't have to. It's the one benefit of being a technician and behind the scenes is that if I'm not in a band, if I'm not a band member begging to go out, like, when is our next show? When can we go out again? I want to make money. I didn't have to be like that because I could go from one project to the next, and because I'm sort of behind the scenes anyway. So I always try to keep busy with doing what I did and not get so heavily invested in one artist. And Prince and I were shooting the shit in his office one day about something. I don't know what year, probably 2003 or 4, or maybe it was 2002 or after One Night Alone. Anyway, we're in there talking about stuff and the phone rings. So I, of course, as the phone rings, he looks down at it and then looked at me and I went, should I go? I just said, hey, do you want me to go? And he was like, no. And he answered the phone and said, hello. And he said, yeah, let me call you. I got to call you back. I'm in a meeting. And he hung up and he said, do you know who that was? And I said, no. He said, that was John Blackwell. And guess what he wanted? And I said, I don't know. And he said, when are we going out again? Right? Because musicians always say that. When are we going out again? I never had to worry about that. I was, fortunate enough to be busy enough to be able to be busy sort of at the times I wanted to. So I made my exit in Australia because I didn't feel the show was going, for the betterment of the show, for his experience, to not have me there. Although I was doing what I was supposed to do and doing it really well and there were no complaints. I just felt like it was the right thing to get out of the way of what he was feeling. If he lost confidence in me or in himself or whatever was going on there. And remember, Vanity had just passed and he made me erase that show. He made me erase some show, and I'm pretty sure it was that show. Where right after the show, one of those shows, I'm pretty sure it was that one, he walked right up to me and said, delete that show. And I said, cool. And I went to my drive and I deleted it. And he said, now empty your trash. And I said, okay. And I shift command delete. And I heard that terrible trash sound that we all hear on Macs. And I was like, cool. And some computer geeks out there are going, it wasn't really gone, I'm sure, but it didn't matter. The show happened in the room. It was important for him to get rid of that show. So I did it for him. And that was the only one that I know of that was missing until I left before Perth. So it was trying to, as someone very close to him said, listen, it's lightning in a bottle, that 21st performance. Don't try and recreate it again. It won't translate well. And there was actually advisement given to him that you shouldn't try and take that out. It's to get back to a band and start playing. But ultimately he did what he wanted to do. And I was a good soldier. And I said, sure, I'll go out and do that. And so it's all about imbibing his vision and for what he wanted to do and support that.
Right. Now I look at it like this, because I've heard about this from Chris James in 2014 or whatnot, with some Third Eye Girl shows that Prince asked him when it was at Paisley Park to delete the show. I'm curious, before that time in Australia for that show, did he ever have you delete any other shows?
No, he didn't. He never had to. Anytime I was mixing him, I was recording the shows or the sound checks he wanted, and back then it was all on digital audio tape, digital format, but it was just my mix, left and right, just the stereo mix that went to the crowd. It was recorded more than anything just as just a sort of documentation and just to gather those assets, never knowing that never figuring they'd be released. And more of the stuff that I mixed will be released, I'm sure. I mean, there are literally hundreds. I think there are 300 DATs that I can recall that I have in the vault, that I have my writing on them and entered into beeped in down in the vault, and they're at Iron Mountain now, and they've been entered into the catalog that whoever's running the catalog will know about. Those things will come out in the future, but they were only there to sort of just be a document of it, and not meant initially for financial remuneration, for monetization's format. I was really happy when he released One Night Alone Live, because it was a feather in my cap that a mix that I could do live for people was able to be released in a beautiful 3 or 4 disc box set, 3 disc maybe box set. That's feather in my cap, and it made Prince some money. So I was then starting to pay for myself. In other words, as a matter of fact, he probably made enough money. I haven't done the calculations, and math isn't my strong suit, but he probably made more money from the box set of One Night Alone, I'm going to guess, than I did working with him over a 26-year period. So that clearly I paid for myself. I told him one time that I said, I'm not above dressing up in a NASCAR style suit and having sponsors all over my front of house area if it pays my salary. Wouldn't that be great if I could pay my salary? You wouldn't have to pay me. I'd get my own sponsors. And he loved that idea, but it stopped short of slapping names all over his instruments. He didn't want that. So there's a fine line in there. I never was able to achieve that with him, where I paid my own salary with sponsors. But I think it's a way that certainly a lot of other entertainment industries have gone that way. A lot of sponsorships, a lot of product placement, things like that, even in live shows. So it's things we have to deal with, or we'll look forward to dealing with again here.
Interesting. Now, as we know, and people now know, like your last tours with him were the Australia shows. You did to Atlanta, and you did the New Year's show. Did you do any Third Eye Girl shows, or what was your time working with him before you were called for New Year's?
I did rehearsals with him. I don't know when I was called out in 2012. We did a bunch of stuff, but I don't think I did any live. I don't remember doing live shows with him, because I was with another band, then maybe Scissor Sisters or someone. I was on tour. And so between my tour It must have been Scissor Sisters because they toured a lot. And boy, I miss that band. And they toured a lot. And on all the little breaks, I would come out and work on things at Paisley Park. So I was always sort of in the loop. And he introduced me to the three ladies and had me take them out to coffee there at the coffee place near Paisley Park. And Prince sat in the Caribou, yeah, and Prince and Joshua sat in Prince's car and listened to music and talked while I talked to the members of Third Eye Girl just as they were forming that band and saying, hey, Prince didn't coach me on what to talk to them about. He just said they could use your advice. And so I just sat and talked about what opportunities had come their way and what kind of work ethic was involved and whatever. I mean, I knew I didn't have to be told by Prince what to do because I always felt I worked with him, not for him. He didn't want the pressure of people working for him. And I think it worked in my favor over the years. I remember after getting over a bad surgery that I had to go through, emergency surgery, after it was all said and done and donations were made, and then I paid off my bill because I didn't have insurance at the time. Prince said, didn't you know you could have just come to me? You don't need insurance. That was in 2002 around that when we were talking, because it was in Takumi's office. He said, you don't need insurance. We work together. We take care of each other. And I said, okay, cool, man. And I thought, hey, don't forget that. Like, let me not forget that. Let you not forget that the next time I need something. And I didn't have to ask him for anything in the future, but he was awesome, a person with whom to work because he was so creative and so at the mercy of his whim and emotion that he did what he wanted to do. And he, again, going all the way back to Dawn's, question, which was what was the best advice, just that having the ownership of what I did. I took great pride in the ownership of what I did, and I let him have ownership of what he did. So I don't think he liked having all that weight of people relying on him. He wanted people to be self-reliant as he was.
Understood.
Am I talking a lot too much, Doc?
No, not at all.
See, I'm specifically not looking at comments either, because I just want to lock in with you, and I want the fans to be able to ask me anything they want, because that's why I'm here to do.
I know I did see some question. I just want to make it,
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go into specifics, but some people are they're wanting to know if you left because of money, and I don't think it was because of money. We just want to make that clear.
No, there was some, the way I described it, it came off looking like I was greedy on some interview, and that's not what it was. What specifically in a nutshell happened was he was trying to start sparking matches at me. He was trying to light matches and get me to, inflame in my sensibility. And in Australia, he was just moody in Australia, super on the down. So when he would try and argue with me, I would just walk out there holding my iPad, something of structure in front of me to hold between us, and just as body language, and just say, "What's up? What do you want to work on?" And when he would try and get in these little arguments, I'd say, "Okay, man, well, tell me what you're going through specifically, and I can address it. What do you want to work on?" And at some point, near the end, I think it was at the Sydney Opera House, he said, "What's the matter, Scottie? Are we not?" No, I told him I wasn't having any fun. I said, "This isn't fun. It should be you and Kirk and I every night having great dinners, listening to music after the show." Mm-hmm. And he said, what's the matter? Are we not paying you? He didn't say I. He said, "What's the matter? Are we not paying you enough?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, what is it then?" I said, No, man. I meant, no, you're not paying me enough. Like, for what I'm going through here, knowing that my deal was what it was, and I was perfectly acceptable in the deal I had. But I said, now that you've sprung what's going on here on me, if it were me and I were grossing I think I said, if I was grossing $1.6 million US a night with no costs and no overhead, I would break off my longtime sound guy. And I just arbitrarily said, I'd break off my longtime sound guy $25,000 a show, just as a figure I threw out. And he looked at me and he said, $50,000 a night for sound. And I said, yeah, absolutely. Sort of like, why not? And I said, hey man, that's not even 5%. And he said, pfft. But I knew it made him think, because he quickly changed the subject and looked out into the empty hall and started playing piano. And he wouldn't play it before, but then he started playing. And I knew it got the wheels turning, because I didn't. The thing of which I'm proud is that I never. He taught me to not take shit over the years. When I didn't take shit from him, he should have seen it coming or expected it. Right? You can't build the product and then get surprised when the product does what you want it to do. So I took great pride in what I did and ownership in what I did. And I said, yeah, I agreed to this amount, but I think I'm worth this. I would have paid me this, if I had no costs. And I would have, if I were him, I would have paid Kirk the same amount. It was just Kirk and Prince and me. So that was sort of taken way out of context and looked like I was holding him ransom, and that's not at all what it was. And my decision at that point actually had already been made to leave. And it was a matter of calling his management back in the US and telling him and letting Kirk know, that I was going to go. But I set things up for him, and I thought it was time that for the betterment. And then we had an email, we emailed all the way up to the 13th, which would have been of April, which would have been like a week before he passed. And it was like, hey, you still owe me this. You're going to pay me? And he was like, no, I'm not paying you. And it got kind of ugly. People don't want to hear about that part of the business, or they look at anybody who's an adversary in that moment of their hero, their artistic hero, as being a bad guy. But I never had a villain cape on, and I never played that part. I was just saying, hey, I expect this to happen. This is what we agreed on. You should at least pay me what you owe me. And which he was trying to hold back. And ultimately, I did get, the money. So it was worth, anything worth having is worth fighting for. And I'm proud that in the end, I didn't take shit from him. And I just said, no, I don't like the behavior that's going on. And I have other things I can do. I wasn't so reliant on that I had to kiss his ass. I was always very, very open and candid with what I expected. And he knew he could rely on me. So we had a good working relationship. I'm proud that I, even to my detriment, was candid all the time. And that's important. I think it's important for people to have that and have that sense of self and stick up for themselves. And we're all going to have to go through that, relearning that again in the next year or two as things unfold. And we have to learn how to get our moves back. We haven't, none of us have, or a lot of us, especially in the music industry, what it's done to the music and entertainment industry. And we're not working the speed bag every day. We don't have our chops up. We have to get back at this. It's going to look very different when we do. And sometimes I wonder, Doc, what, on occasion, not very often, but I wonder what Prince would have thought of all this in this time, what he would have thought of George Floyd, what he would have thought of Donald Trump. He didn't see Trump as president. He never saw that. He didn't see these last 4 years. Love him or hate him, I don't care either way. What would he have thought of all these things, and how he would react to a terrible virus? And I think we're missing, as a world, we're missing his social response, because Prince's social response was usually one of music. He was a musical response to a social issue, and that's what I miss. I miss him as a person sometimes, and I could say that, yeah, we were friends, and he kind of badgered me on that question. Are we friends? Are we friends? And knowing it was a loaded question, as soon as I said yes, and he said, well, then why aren't you doing this? So he sort of held me hostage with that question. But I think overall we were friends. We did work together a long time. We had an understanding. And I do think that he would have had very valuable things to say about the time we're in now, and that they would have been in a musical form. And the sad thing in all of this is that a couple things. One thing, we don't get to know what Prince would have thought of all these things. And the more every day that goes by is one less day we get of his view of things, right? And the second thing is, we have generations now, or a generation of people who aren't learning about him as he's alive, to the point to which, when I was talking with a colleague of mine, and someone came up and they said, well, they asked me, well, who have you mixed before? And that colleague of mine said, you don't know Scottie Baldwin? Man, he mixed Prince. And the person, who was young, in the early 20s, looked at me and said, William or Harry? And I said, what? I said, no, my colleague said he worked with Prince. He's worked with Prince. And they said, William or Harry? And I went, oh my God, you didn't just say that. Holy shit. So they think I worked with Prince William or Prince Harry. That's not a good sign. So it's, I don't know where I'm going here. And I'm just sort of, maybe I had a few many cappuccinos this afternoon, but it's about how things move forward. You have the estate, you've got his family, you've got people in charge of the record releases, you've got the bank, you've got all these people seemingly waiting in line to do things when really Prince isn't here. So, and the electric part of him, the magnanimous, the being of energy that when you were in a room, you always knew when Prince was in the room with you. Everyone has that same feeling. And I'll miss that about it. I'll miss that about him. I do miss that. I miss the level of working with him. I miss that sort of good nervous energy about taking on something, a really tough after show, or, making something out of nothing, spit and duct tape. And we made great shows out of that on the after show. So there are certain things I miss, but I've been able to take all the things that he did teach me and all the things that I sort of knew what to do. And I've slapped together a pretty lazy, but pretty successful career in doing it. And I appreciate all that he was in that.
100%.
I talk a lot. Sorry, everyone.
I try not to get into other things of what Prince would think this, what Prince think that. I just try to think more of like, the only thing I can say for certain, because I don't want to make any assumptions on anything.
Yeah.
The thing I can say for certain is Taylor Swift's battle over her masters. He would have been supportive of that, and maybe they would have made a third album of her music together. That's all I can say just on that. Of other things that have happened since then, when it becomes more real issues, I don't want to, push assumptions on there, because as we know, is ever changing, Prince is ever evolving. So,
and I mean, what would he have thought of Bob Dylan getting 300 million for his catalog, or Stevie Nicks 100 million? I mean, these people have a right to do everything that they want to do without judgment. It's too easy now to judge, especially electronically. We can judge people and say what we want without seeing how that affects them. That's not really a healthy thing to do. So but I think he definitely would have had a say about those things happening. And I don't, as I say, his life was meant to end on that elevator just 3 short months after tonight, 5 years ago. And that was his arc. His narrative arc was meant to end then. And that's fine. I don't think it should have been any different. And but playing that game of what would Prince do, WWPD, that's no one can win at that, because it was hard enough to guess what he would do in life. Trying to guess what he would do after he's gone is you can't win. He would have had some curveballs nobody saw coming. That's what was exciting about him.
Yeah, I'd be on the same wavelength at times, and sometimes not being around him made it easier. I feel that's why I wouldn't say survived. I lasted as long as I did.
Well, I think you kept he had a healthy dose of respect for you. I know that. And I think the people that went away from him and came back, the people that were successful in their endeavor, in other endeavors that they did, Roy Bennett comes to mind, who's succeeded wildly in his area of expertise and his artistic vision. Mine, working with other artists. I think you doing your thing and then coming back now and again. I don't think Prince had a respect for people that left him and came back, because you never knew you're going to get somebody stronger. And I remember coming back from Earth, Wind and Fire once. I went off to mix Earth, Wind and Fire. I came back from that tour, and the first thing Prince said to me before we went on stage, he's like, "They aren't playing all that stuff, Scottie." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Earth, Wind and Fire. They're playing the tracks." And I said, "No, man." I said, "No, they're playing it all." I said, "There's some tracks there, but they're playing." I said, "Verdine's dancing around playing all that stuff and both bass lines on Getaway." And he's like, "Yeah." And he just didn't want to admit that, or I think he actually liked that I would go off and then come back and do things, because that, just like any relationship, when you go off and you come back, it's the return that's kind of special. So I knew the dynamic of our working relationship. And I try to be very, very honest with how it was always dealt with how I dealt with that relationship. The people in the studios, they didn't have the studio engineers, Peggy, Susan, Chris James, Dave. I mean, they go way back. Tom Tucker, they didn't have quite the advantage because they were always in, and Dave Hampton certainly, they were always in a mode of being prepared, whether or not they were going to be used. That's a whole different animal. You can do your job well and then just sort of wait for something to be instigated. With me, I could go away and go, when things weren't on, I would leave and do other things and come back for live shows. So I had an advantage in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I never truly went away. It was just constantly coming up with different ideas. And of course, having the website and a social media presence to where, I covered more than just Prince. And that's why I've always tried to do. All right, he hasn't posted about me in a few days or whatnot. Like, Doc we better send him a little tidbit or something, or making sure of it. But I just felt that, you sometimes had to know what he was thinking or other things, which made it hard. And it would be easier to do from a distance. And that's why I feel, and of course, him definitely respecting people that, would leave him do their own thing and have success at it and be like, hey, wait, come back.
Well, that's because as I've described before, it's hard to say it in another way than this. Certainly this will make the most impact. I think most of the relationships in Prince's life had a romantic feel to them. They weren't romantic in nature, but they did have the feeling of attraction and then separation, and then attraction again and separation. They were sort of this relationship of, look at me, don't look at me, like, wait, what? And so there was always sort of this, sort of a little battle going on. Just as he was a contrarian in life, he was a contrarian in his relationships. So one day you were riding high and you were his keyboard player. The next day you wanted a rental car and he didn't want to give you one, and you were out of the band. And then the next day, and then the day after that, we'll say we play the Fillmore, or we play an after show, and then they said, oh, they didn't even show up to see the after show. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, but you fired, like, why would they? But there was a lot of attraction and repulsion in those relationships. They had a dynamic, almost like a male female or male male or female female. They had a relationship that existed in a romantic tension. That's how I describe it.
Now, let me ask you this, because it was on my mind earlier. Because, the venues that he was playing small, whether it was Paisley Park for microphone, same with the Opera House in Australia. What were your thoughts when you heard that, after coming back from Australia, you had the Denise's passing, and then he did play a venue in the Bay Area. But then he was about to play Oracle Arena, where they were just having a basketball game there of 17,000. Were you thinking of the sound or other things where he goes from this small venue to a basketball arena?
To be very candid, once I left Auckland, New Zealand, I didn't give it a second thought. I went from Auckland to, I had weird routing at the last minute. I went through Houston and then up to Minnesota. And then I got right on a plane and went back to Los Angeles and started to work on the project I was on in between things. Didn't think about Prince or what was going on. The emails, the heated email, the flame mails, they hadn't started yet about, hey, you owe me money. Hey, I'm not going to pay you. And the olive branch email that I sent him that said, hey, let's meet. If we are friends, as you suggested, let's get together. Maybe this is something through which we can navigate. Let's meet to discuss.
Right.
And then he asked me for a phone number, and then I gave him my phone number, and then he didn't call. And it was this like thing. But so I wasn't thinking about where he was playing or that he even had a piano and a microphone continuing on. So I didn't know I knew they were headed to the Bay because I think my hotel room had already been booked for a week or so. Matter of fact, I got a hold of friends and said, hey, I'll be in San Francisco with 4 days off or 4 days to burn or something like that. So I knew they were headed there, but I frankly lost interest as soon as I left, and I just focused on myself. I wasn't looking in the rearview mirror because that's like saying, I'm leaving you. And then after you leave, you're still trying to peep and see I just left and I did my thing. And then quite literally other than the emails going back and forth, and once we kind of settled, I was on a flight back from Los Angeles when I learned of his death. When I was on the flight, I actually got Wi-Fi on the flight, and then my phone took off like crazy. So, and then I just sort of went, oh, yeah, I wasn't in shock, but I just thought, well, I didn't know it was him. They thought it was him at that point, right? We didn't know yet. And then but once I discovered it was him, I thought, well, that's interesting. Didn't see that one coming. And I guess the sorrow over the whole thing didn't kick in for about 3 months until I realized, oh, we're not going to, I just figured we'd work together again. I'd argue with him like I'd done in the past, or he'd bait me into an argument, we'd argue, and then I'd leave. That happened 2 or 3 times. But I just thought once I left him, I thought I'd get a call in 6 months from Kirk saying, okay, he wants you to come out and let's work on this new thing, or he's got a new band member or something like that. I just figured that would happen because it had happened before. So hearing he passed away, I was like, well, that was his time. I didn't have to deal with all the grief the way the fans do. I really feel for the fans because it's about placement, right? You're trying to place where it all is and how does it fit in and what could have been done and who is responsible and all that. And none of that, it matters, but it doesn't matter. It's about where you place it. And I remember thinking, well, I hope he's at peace. I hope he's at peace. I hope he had peace in his life before he passed. I'm not a religious person, but I just wished him peace. And I'm curious to know how other people, I've heard over the years how other people handle it. I'm sure it was rough on you because I don't think you saw it coming, did you?
I was just there like the weekend before.
Oh, wait a minute. Were you at the thing where he picked up the guitar and did all that? Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is that I started getting calls from people from radio stations and text about the plane in Moline. And I was just kind of like, I checked his Twitter feed, and when he was touring or wasn't in Minneapolis, where he was, it would be taken off. But when he was back in Minnesota, it said Chanhassen, Minnesota. And they had the I am transformed message that a fan wrote. That's why it didn't have the EYE, it had the I. And I'm like, well, whatever happened, he's back in Minnesota now. And then radio stations were picking it up. TMZ was picking it up. And then I get this message, hey, Prince wants to do an event at Paisley Park tomorrow for the great weather in Minnesota and how great the Atlanta shows were. And I went, okay, if you want me to get the word out, let me know. Like, yes, we want you to get the word out. And Prince wants you to go. And I always felt this way, that I sometimes felt that people wanted Prince's Purple Rain money, and he felt that way too. And I went, I'll get the word out. Unless he wants me there, I don't need to be there. If he needs me to be there or wants me to be there, I'll be there. And then literally like 15, 20 minutes later, the earliest flight at LAX is at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Can you make it? I'm like, if he needs me to be there, I'll be there. And then they were booking everything. But, and then I started putting out there like, oh, Prince should do an event at Paisley Park tomorrow. People are like, no, he should be getting rest. I'm like, they do understand that this is coming from him, right? That I wouldn't be suggesting it, but he was trying to show that he was okay. And then it's like, I arrive in Minnesota, we're chilling, not meaning me and him, but I was chilling with someone else. And then I went to Paisley a little later on. Then it was shortly, right around midnight, that he comes out of the studio and we lock eyes. And I just nod my head and I'm here. Because I had a feeling, I always had feelings whether Prince wanted to talk that day or not talk. When I woke up that morning after 90 minutes of resting, I felt that Prince didn't want to talk. He just wanted me to report what was going on. Like I said, we locked eyes. Kirk was behind him in the studio door. So when Prince locked eyes with me, he was already going towards the stage of the music club room. And then that's when he said, strange days, huh? When you hear stuff like that, wait a few days, say prayers for a few days. And in the sense of, don't believe everything you hear. I'm okay. But as we learned, he wasn't. Look, The afro made him look older than what he did. Say in 2011, where he had the quote unquote Rihanna hairstyle. He looked young, he looked vibrant. And that night, even though it was a warm night in Minnesota, he was wearing a leather jacket because apparently he had lost some weight from January 21st to where we saw him. But already, the afro to me made him look older. The leather jacket was kind of hiding him being thinner than usual. And I did see that after he, made the announcements and showed off the Yamaha piano and the new guitar, that he chilled for a bit because he played a little bit of the Atlanta show. He played the Baby I'm a Star, where I don't need a doctor unless his name is Funk, because we were talking a week before about my show and I wanted to shorten the name from Dr. Funkenberry to Dr. Funk. During that show, he's saying, I don't need no doctor unless his name is Funk, and then going, what? F-I-N-K, kind of like taking a shot at Dr. Fink. They're going, not F-U-N-K, F-I-N-K. Obviously, we didn't have a chance to discuss what was that about, but it's just like there was a friend of mine, Christina, who was worried, and we were in my hotel room, and she's just like, he's not looking right. And I'm like, what do I do? He wants everyone to say that he's good. He's going to, whatever's happening, he's going to get help, right? That's all I was thinking. And then we just figured, that this wasn't going to happen. So I didn't expect anything. All I know is that a girlfriend of his, or a former girlfriend of his, apparently would talk with him every Thursday morning. And before there was any reports going on, she hit me up that he's not picking up the phone at Paisley, and she was worried. And then this is when start finding out about the doctor was supposed to fly in and all these other things were supposed to happen. And then you start having TMZ call, because I just did TMZ a few days earlier, because we knew that they were watching. They were now on waiting for something catastrophic to happen. And there I was on the show just to say, he said these things that, nope, you got it wrong about the strange days. This is what was meant, because they were already trying to go in that direction. So then before he was announced that he wasn't here anymore, I got a call from Harvey Levin. And, he's all like, I hear it's Prince's body that's there. Because at first we knew that there was a body found. We didn't know it was his. And then Harvey's telling me, all right, if I don't hear back from you in 10 minutes saying that it isn't his body, I'm going live with the story on TMZ. And of course, I have my own website, I have my own stuff. I didn't get a clarification. I called back to someone there, or someone that was in contact, and they sent it to voicemail. And that was my clarification. If he was okay, they would have picked up the phone. And then I'm sitting there, someone that I have been a fan of my entire life. I could have been putting it on my side or putting it on Twitter, oh, he passed away. If TMZ wants to be the first to post that he passed away, let him do it. And I just said, I had Nika Costa, Justin Stanley hitting me up, and a few other people. And I was just saying privately, it's not looking good. But until his PR person made the official statement, I didn't say anything. But yeah, it was someone unexpected. And all I kept saying to myself was, I was just there, and I was like, aside from Kurt, because Marone was there and whatnot, I was one of the last people to leave that night. So, it was probably one of the last, maybe, I don't even want to say 5 people, I'll say 10 people that saw him alive, although it was days later, but he was just with Kirk and Marone and then trying to get help. I'd expected to take this turn on stuff, but yeah, it was
I think there's an important lesson in all this, if I'm not to be trivial in saying all this, is that all of us have artists in our life that are meaningful to us. Prince was a meaningful person in our life. He spoke to our spirit and our soul, and he taught us about ourselves, and he taught us to ask the great questions of ourselves about being straight, gay, black, white. He was a resonant being, not to be again too ethereal, but he was resonant, and he touched a lot of people in his material, and he was a great songwriter, and he knew how to craft. He was great at his craft. He had a mystery about him, and he sort of knew how to perpetuate that, keep that image going as well for a really long time. So when you have somebody that special, who's engaged in art, and we get attached to them, it's very meaningful when they go away. We don't want to see artists like that go away. And I can tell you, the 26 years that I spent working with him off and on, and there were some times that were really off for a couple of 2-3 years, and then there were times that were really intense, where I was at Paisley Park every day for 3 years straight. When I was single back then, and just went in every single day. Through all of that time, I can tell you that I never saw a harder worker. I never saw someone more dedicated to any craft, not just music. Never saw anyone who was as, even though he didn't read music, and we had a long discussion about, or rather short discussion, but it was a very pointed discussion about reading music. And I said, "Oh, I didn't know you didn't read, man. Maybe you can go back and learn." He said, "No." I said, "Bobby McFerrin went back and learned how to be a conductor and won, a bunch of awards for it." And he said, "No, if I learned how to read now, it would change the way I write, and I influence too many people. I don't want to change that." And that's a great answer. That's not a lazy answer. It's someone who understands their effect on the world. So he's not here anymore. What do we do with that? The great lesson in all this, and hearing the obvious pain through which you went, that I didn't at first, because I was divorced from the nature of, I was into my own thing. I just had to go. I was used to leaving Prince and going to another thing, and leaving that artist and going back to this thing, or going back to Prince. So I was used to the bounce. And but it's hard to know where to go, especially now when we are trying to figure out how to make sense of all that's in the world now. His family has to make sense of it. The estate, all the players in all of this have to figure out how to move forward. And I think people still, especially on a night like tonight, and looking at the time, we were done with show one. I had gone into Studio A in the dark, felt my way from the soundstage to Studio A. Turned on the light, and the moment I turned on the light, maybe 5 seconds later, the phone rang. And I looked at John Gass, and he looked at me, and he said, "Well, I'm not gonna answer it." And I said, "Shit." So I just picked it up and said, "Scottie." And he said, "Did you put it in the machine yet?" And I said, "No, we're working on it. I'm going to because he was already thinking about the show and having John start mixing it, even though he went through this whole emotional performance. I don't know how many times you were there. I don't know. You know better than me how many times he left stage. When he would leave stage and come down to me, he was crying. There were at least 2 or 3 times that he came down. And the first time he came down, I just thought he wanted to say something to me. And he came over, and I saw he was crying. So I just turned to the side to give him his space, because it wasn't a lot of space. You can see even from the photo, it's a very tight quarters back there behind the curtain and between the curtain and the wall next to the door. And so knowing him and how we operated together, when he came over to me, I just turned to the side and moved the box of Kleenex over there and let him dry his eyes and get a sip of tea and then go back on. And that must have happened 2 or 3 times, at least on the first show near the end. So it was quite an emotional ride for him. I don't think that says anything. I think people can read into it whatever they want. I personally believe that he was a very special artist. I've said this quote before, but I mean it every time I say it, that Picasso said, I might be paraphrasing, but he said, "Art is a lie that tells us the truth." So movies, music, all art, painting, writing, poetry, all art is a lie that tells us the truth about ourselves. It's made up, but it tells us about who we are. We've all ingested Prince as an artist, as a coworker, as a brother, as a friend. We have to figure out how we move on from this. It's very important how we move on. And it says a lot more about us than it does about the absence of him. And I feel for all the people that have to look at anniversaries like this, like today, and get sad about it. I think it should be a celebration. It's probably, I don't think it's a stretch to say that in the WWPD, it would be, he would want us to celebrate him. He might not have wanted tributes. He might not have wanted certain things released. He might have wanted other things to be released. But in all, it's just the spirit of celebration. Again, it's not the format or the vehicle that gets you there. It's the content. It's the conversation in the car that gets you to where you're going to be. It's always about content. That's way more meaningful to me as a person. And I was super glad to be a responsible part of getting really great cream of the crop music. You know, as I say, you don't play your crappy material live. You play your best stuff.
Right.
I took the responsibility of taking Prince's material and making sure it was presented in a format that people could ingest it and really be moved by it. I take that with great pride that I was a responsible part of that. And in the future, I'll always, extend myself to teaching people, and maybe that's where my future is headed, is teaching people about why he was special, how he approached the live, since he was such a prolific live performer, how he approached the live game. Maybe that's my pivot. I don't know. I haven't thought about it that much. It's a lot to think about when you have a family and we're going through what we're going through societally with cops murdering people and pandemics. And it just seems like, we're missing our balls of flame falling out of the sky. And so how do you deal with that? It's not that, it's how you deal with the loss, how you deal with the problem that I think defines who we are. So I'm glad to, especially with you, I'm glad to come on and talk about how special that was. And it was quite nice because I had to dig long and hard this morning for a photograph that was representative of that night. And what I think was really cool, and I had to think about all the logistics and legal aspects. There's not a symbol in the picture. There's not a this in the picture. I don't have any music rolling in the background. I had to think about all that shit because that's what it is. It's just shit. But I picked this photo that I put behind me because it was from my point of view. It's where I stood and looked at him from behind and watched him perform these two amazing shows. It was my little slice of the world. It's in the dark, which is where I spent my career, out front or in back, in the dark, supporting. And I thought it was probably my favorite photo now that I rediscovered it. But I quite by accident, I went, what is that photo? And double clicked. And I went, well, that's great. I just wanted to get a shot of where my desk was so that I knew where to put it in case we moved stuff. And yet I got this shot of where I actually was at this time 5 years ago tonight. Right now, I was standing in exactly where it looks like I'm standing now.
Right. And just want to give a mention because we saw Taika come into the room and she was at Paisley the night that I was there.
Great.
Week before we passed. Another thing, like when I did, the interviews I did after he passed, because I felt like I had to, because I thought they're going to talk to people that didn't really know him, and especially the last few years of his life. And the question was put to me, like, what would Prince want people to know? And that's what I said on the interview, is that he would be so upset that everyone is so sad and being sad tonight. He wanted you to celebrate him, put on some good music, celebrate him, celebrate his music, think happy thoughts, think positive thoughts. So we need to be sad about someone that you loved, but we need them to continue in our heart and continue in our journey. It's easier for me to listen to Days of Wild than it is sometimes It Snows in April, So those things. So I'd rather listen to some of the positive music that goes on with stuff. And now bringing it back to 121:16, a little bit of the review.
Sure.
And Dudley D, his comment to you.
One of my favorites. Yeah.
Can someone let Scottie know that AirPods retires? I have some of those too, and I'm listening to the vault tracks. Whoops.
Just tell Dudley D that I have pictures of him in Japan doing stuff that would never be able to be shown anywhere. So no, I tried. You know what? I'm an audio guy, but I'm not an audiophile. I tried AirPods today and I ran a test, and in my Virgo way, I recorded a little bit and then I watched it back and I went, oh, that sounds shitty. Those sound shitty. you know, I'd rather have a nice big, I don't know, maybe you can't see it because it's split screen, but I have a nice, decent $100 microphone here. And also yeah, there it is. Look at this dented, cheap, junky, but it sounds good. It sounds better than AirPods. So, I just thought I would do the best thing that I could. I couldn't get the AirPods to work with this microphone and these AirPods. So maybe I'm a Luddite after all, and I need a refresher course before I get back there. Dudley hasn't slowed down. He's still DJing. So,
Right.
but unfortunately, when there's nobody to play, there's nobody to mix. I can't mix because there's no one playing. So maybe I'm off my game a little bit. I got to go and work the speed bag and get in the meat locker and start hitting beef or something because, yeah, but I don't know. I kind of like headphones, good sounding headphones. Dudley D.
And then Dave Hampton's here as well. So you got
good.
Dudley, and Dave. I'm sure there's others that are watching that always watch us that don't say anything. They're watching.
They can make fun of my headphones. I don't care. I'm secure in who I am.
It's all good.
Make fun of these headphones. These are blue brand. These are awesome headphones.
And of course, in the future, we'll love, we've had Dustin Dudley on before. We've had Dave on before. Taika, of course, we want to have on in the future when things get settled and whatnot, or whenever. I never spoken with, we probably messaged a couple times, I believe in 2009, 2010. We haven't really talked. I've probably spoken with President, her son, a lot more than that. But, of course, her input and whatnot, and that she watches the show, I appreciate it. Now, back to something that, like I said, I probably haven't read in a while, just because we were talking about times, and then, the review of the show. And anything that comes up while I'm reading this, please interrupt me and go for it. So it was just doing the review. Prince performed a 2-show set at his Paisley Park studios in Chanhassen, Minnesota last night, where he took the stage for the first time by himself. Prince proved he really is a one-man band. Keep in mind, my notes were 65 pages, writing a book in the freaking dark because of how dark it was in there. From the setting of a piano, a spotlight, and a microphone, and a kaleidoscope design hitting behind the stage where his cymbal was located, smoke began to appear and the cymbal doors opened up. Prince took the stage for his first set a little before 8:40 p.m. In the audience on a personal journey. See, I had to get the time on it too, knowing exactly what it was and looking at it. Personal journey, talking about his relationship with his father and his father's piano. His father wouldn't let him play the piano. Then his mom was going to divorce his father, so he would be around less, and the piano was still there. He then went into the Batman TV theme. My father says I can't play like I did. How did he do that? What could he play? He played an instrumental feeling that showed his dad he could play. Now he wants to sing. What could he sing? Maybe he listened to the radio. Then he talked about radio personalities and how one DJ was so bad, he had his own band, bad in a good way. He had his own band and it was higher than James Brown's band. He went to a soulful cover, the Jackson 5 staple, Who's Loving You? Now he's like, yeah, I can sing. Now I just need to write my own songs. And then he went into Baby from his first album, For You, full version, followed by I Want to Be Your Lover, which got the audience grooving. Now I need to find out who I am. He conquered the piano, teaching himself how to play along with a dozen more instruments, taught himself how to sing, how to make hit records. Now, who is he? Prince goes into Dirty Mind, which got the crowd screaming, and he's like, tisk, tisk, tisk. Was that to the audience's reaction or how he feels now looking back on it? That thought isn't pondered for too long as Prince goes into the opening chords of Do Me Baby, complete with those princely screams. The audience erupts further. Whatever guy tells you he didn't learn how to play to get a girl is lying. You will find someone that you will have 992 arguments with and hope you are both still around for argument 993. This turns into Something in the Water Does Not Compute, adding a few more words. Now he talks about needing freedom and how he is a product of that. So I have that so far, and I'm just trying to see if there's any comments or anyone doing anything. Sorry about that. Thank you, Taika. A beautiful rendition of Free is played at the end. He says, Peace, David Bowie. Audience cheers. I only met him once at Paisley Park in the 1980s. That's something I put in parenthesis. Very nice to me. He seemed like he was very nice to everyone. And this is when I talked about the Robert Hilburn article comparing Bowie and Prince, that Prince would and should follow in the footsteps of Bowie's Sound and Vision tour to where he would no longer perform previous material. At the time, Prince's career was barely a decade old compared to Bowie's 20-plus career. People try to make comparisons with Prince to other artists who are Black, but because of Prince's ability to be a visionary, and although their visions and music are vastly different, Prince has more in common with David than other artists who came before him. Now, keep in mind, again, I wrote this on January 22nd, so Prince was still here. That says that Prince has more in common. Prince followed that up with A Case of You by Joni Mitchell. It connected with the crowd as I heard a few tears and sobs. The space right here, that's the good part. Think about how funky this is and how funky that ain't. The space between the notes. He hits the holy wine line, and it seems like more than cheeks are wet. Again, my imagery, I had to go there. This is followed up by Sometimes I Feel Like Being a Motherless Child. The Beautiful Ones is next, where he talks about that song. Like, these are written by being called a jerk. And if you stay and make it work, beautifully amazing version. Paraphrasing here, hard to take notes in the dark. Everything up to this point is in chronological order, including the placement of A Case of You, which he was covering around that time. He goes into You're Gonna See Me from his piano release One Night Alone from 2002. Then it's followed by How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore? Was it something I said? Was it something I did? Plays the intro to How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore fully and quickly goes into Condition of the Heart, followed by a little bit of Venus de Milo. Raspberry Beret follows, where he gave a shout out to Lisa and Wendy and shared a story when he met Lisa and felt it wasn't going to work out as she wouldn't look him in the eye. He heard her playing in another room and talked about her favorite piano player being Bill Evans, and went into the horoscope part of Raspberry Beret and said she wrote that part. He clarified in the second set that she didn't write the song, just that part. And then Paisley Park is played next, and it's turned into a sing-along. How many people have lucid dreams? God, as I said, I haven't probably read this since January 22nd, 2016. I have such dreams like that. I have dreams of friends who have parted, and it feels like I get to see them again. This is followed by an emotional performance of Sometimes It Snows in April. He plays the intro to the Ballad of Dorothy Parker, but follows it up quickly with I Love You, but I Don't Trust You Anymore. And then does go back into the Ballad of Dorothy Parker. And when the Joni part comes up, he states, that was my favorite Joni song. All of her songs are my favorite. Give it up for Joni. He goes into a little of Unchain My Heart by Ray Charles, which is followed up by last year's Baltimore anthem. Would love to hear this Pardoned with Dreamer as part of the set. Rock and Roll Love Affair, and it is sing-along time again. Starfish and Coffee is then played, and the audience is full onto into it. Then comes a heartfelt performance of The Breakdown, which he follows with a powerful version of Anastasia. They end up closing out the first set to rounding applause. I do believe it was in the second set where he mentioned about giving you props, right? Was in this?
No, that was the first set. It was after
I see it. I have it written here.
Motherless Child, Case of You, or something.
And then I just said this in closing on the first set review. If anyone tells you they saw Prince before, maybe 2 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, tell them, yeah, but you didn't see him last night. This Piano A Microphone show is everything. It will give you the feels and then some. It just shows how dynamic he is and how often his tours and sets change continuously. Bobby Z said a couple years ago that Prince is better now than when he was during the Revolution days. Last night proved it over and over. Prince shared a detailed story of his father, and that his father was his best friend. It was open-hearted. It was him at his most brutally honest. This was the very first show by himself, and for those that were there, it was worth everything and more. And we won't get... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's well written, and that's beautiful, and that's what I'm talking about, the connection to the material. You didn't have to talk about how it sounded in there. You didn't have to talk about anything like that. It was about the connection and the emotional to the emotional content. And, people talk about what was Prince's best instrument. And I still laugh at that because it's not like you have to have one. You express yourself different with every instrument. And yes, he was an amazing guitar player. And no, he was probably a shitty trumpet player. That's why he didn't play trumpet. You do the things you do well. He was an amazing guitar player, made really inventive stuff happen on guitar. And to me, clearly his best instrument was his voice. As I've said, 26 years, 0 flat notes, 0 sharp notes. bad monitors, good monitors, didn't matter. No monitors. I never heard him sing flat. I never heard him sing sharp. That's a fact. I'm sure he had, but I never heard it, and it never happened when I was on duty with him. Voice was his. I tell you, I could do it. I've said before, maybe, that I could do a 2 or 3 hour podcast just talking about his voice only, because I knew it so well. But piano was something that I think he had been. He'd never been given great credit for it. As a matter of fact, I remember Prince kind of showing off once, and I was alone with him somewhere. He was showing me some video clips, and he said, "Scottie, check this out." And this is in the 90s. This is when I was drum tech. He said, "Watch this clip." And it was a clip of I think Quincy Jones talking about Prince. And he said something, I'm almost sure it was Quincy Jones, said, "Oh, he's a good player, but he can't play, And then it cuts to a shot of Prince just playing this incredible flourish on the piano. So he loved sort of, and I don't know whether that ever got out, but it was he was proud of his piano playing, and he was really super expressive, and he did some cool chord structure changes. I think he was so effective on piano, and I think certain people like Matt Fink and especially Lisa, they had a real influence on how he looked at keys and how he treated them. That night would have looked very different had he done it on guitar or acoustic.
Right.
I was happy he did 30 minutes every night on musicology with an acoustic guitar. But he was so much better on piano because he had the ability to, as I pointed out before, he liked playing, not to get too technical, he liked playing piano, but he wanted to be able to fade those strings in because it was a way that he could sustain the way a piano would. If you play a piano chord, at some point, if you hold the chord, after a few seconds, it's going to sustain and go away. But when he played with that synthesizer patch underneath it, the string patch, he could play a chord and use the strings to get to a part where it would out sustain a real piano. And then he just chose when he wanted to use it. He used it masterfully at Paisley Park. He used it just as well in Australia because he had to actually physically change the patches on that one. And so he really was in rare form. It was in amazing performance that night. And I think people in the room all were subject to something that was really, really special. And I'm a hard sell on special nights, but I think that was something that we all knew when we left. As tired as I was, I got pulled over that night when I left that show. And this guy said, "Whoa, like, where are you coming from?" And I said, "Oh man, I'm Paisley Park." And he said, "Oh yeah, okay, go ahead." And he just didn't, but it was like, I left at 3:30 or 4 a.m. and they knew out there, it was a really special night for a lot of people. So I'm glad people will, and ultimately people will be able to enjoy it later, but in time. And then when they look back at this podcast, it will have dated itself, talking about coronavirus and when will this come out? But that's okay. We can have that forethought. We can have that knowledge now,
Right.
and just treat it as it should be, because now here we are, 10:36. What time did show 2 start? Do you know that? Did you write that down?
Yeah.
It wasn't 11 o'clock.
I only print out show 1's review, so I don't have the time of show.
So right now I was probably in the studio A with him calling me. That's why I swear he had a camera in there, because as soon as I turned on the lights, he called from his apartment and said, "Is it in there? Did you transfer it yet?" I said, "Oh, we're working on it." But we were getting ready for show 2 5 years ago tonight. And I'm not big, I got to let you know, Doc, I'm not big on anniversaries and birthdays and things like that. It's not that I forget them. It's just that I go, well, yeah, sure, it was 5 years ago tonight, but it's just one day one day more ago that happened. But I do understand why it's meaningful to people to actually consider those things. Like, it's been 5 years. I think all of us are going, wow. Nobody's saying, wow, it's been a long time. They're all saying, oh my God, I can't believe how fast that went.
Right.
And what we missed out on in those 5 years. What have you got there?
A pass from the show. I think I have 2 of them. But yeah, although I didn't get the second hat box from the second show, people were jacking them, but got one of the first ones and have, a poster and a memento of the show.
What's funny is you have a poster and a memento, and I think I asked Kirk, "Hey, are we getting passes or something?" He's like, "No, everybody knows who you are." And I went, "Oh, okay." So even us crew, the very few skeleton crew, it was like Kirk and me and Marone. There were only a few people, Andrew maybe, and we didn't have passes. We were the only ones that didn't have any sort of pass. So I just thought, well, so it was.
Just saying, when they release the set, have something like that in there. Maybe a little bit different for the people that actually had it, but to let people know how special it was, you get like a little pass with it. Maybe a little poster that comes with the set. There's so many other things. I don't want to be giving away stuff for free because then they end up using it.
Well, no, they'll certainly. Everyone involved realizes the gravity of this performance. Mm-hmm. This wasn't just a show that happened in some city or an after show that happened that went super late into the night. This is a one-off performance, one-off night that happened, and everyone involved knows. And so it will be extremely special whenever it does come out, and it'll be done the right way. You can bet on that.
Something small that I mentioned. There's other things to do that I would have more concern just about getting the younger fans and younger generation. I also think just because I saw, I looked at my email or whatnot. Thank you, Arlene, for donating or whatnot. Was there any questions that you saw on Twitter or other places that, they asked beforehand or whatnot, Scottie, that you remember right now for it?
No, I'm up for anything. I told you I can go longer than you can. So what's your show record? Is it 3 hours or something? We can bust
2 minutes that beat you with Michael Bland. So
well, of course, because Michael talks a lot. He talks more than I do.
Right.
But no, we're at 2:20 right now, so I can easily beat that. And I got kids that have to go to bed. I can work it.
I'm sure.
But no, if there's anything fans want to know, I'm
hopefully the show or other things. Yeah. I'm just looking for the questions. Just because it's unfortunate. This is the only reason I missed the old format. Is there was really great questions that are happening during the live show. I can put them in a queue, and stuff like this. We'd have it open beforehand, and then people could be having questions that we can go through to put in the queue. But we don't have that. So sometimes it's like there'll be great questions, but I don't want us to get off topic about things. Let's see. Here it goes. Was at the shows, and both shows were great, but the first one, 2 a.m. UK time, so unable to attend. But can you ask Scottie how he managed to get that quadraphonic sound so clear, and also Prince's mic? He seemed like he can sing further away from it and yet still hit the falsetto.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a really good question. I thank the listener and the viewer for that. Quadraphonic, as I explained to Prince, only really works. Quadraphonic sound only really works for the very center point that it's meant to hit. You can have 5.1, you can have Dolby Atmos, you can have all these other formats that sort of give you a sense of being in the room. Prince, not knowing that would only work for one point in the room, I had to sort of do a quick Cliff Notes version of getting him up to speed why that wouldn't work the way he wanted it to. And it wouldn't have. So what I did is we ended up with the speakers lowered down. If you remember, they were just above the doors, the 2 entry doors, and then the 2 corners. They were just higher than the doors. So I had them they started at 9 feet high, and they shot across the room. The rest was filled in with the 4 subs and the 4 speakers on top of the stage. And then I took some wedges and I put them out on the corners because I didn't feel like the people on the corner of the stage could hear well enough. So I sort of had to last minute get things, on day of, I should say. Well, I did playback. I just sort of balanced it all out. And that night that Prince and I went over the set list, we had some time to go over. And he said, well, can you make things bounce around the room? I said, yeah, I can pan them wherever I want. I showed him a couple of things. As a matter of fact, I'll get to his microphone in a second, but there's in Sometimes It Snows in April, he started rehearsing that song, and he stopped after the Civil War, and he used his fingers as snap, and he went like that. And I interrupted him, which you think it'd be a huge sin to do that. But I just said, oh, hold up, man. I said, I got something for that. Can you do it again? You start from the top. And then he just looked back and started again. Played, and he said, Tracy, and he did where the drum is, he did a snap, and I made the snap go in quadraphonic, and I made it bounce all around the room. Instead of just adding reverb, I wanted to try something that was more dimensional for the fans. So you never want to outdo, you never want to outshine the thing that's happening. I think too much of audio is trickery, and it's made to make you go, ooh, wah. And when really it's about the material. So I was reverential to the material, but I did do a special delay that bounced all around the room for that. As far as his microphone, I had always wanted to try a certain microphone on him by a certain manufacturer. And in the promo photos, you'll notice the mic stand is coming from the wrong side. It's coming from the onstage side, the downstage side. And it's got a cable. And Dave Hampton says, center points around mixing for a totally live act is not easy. Scottie did a great job at creating a real immersive experience. Thanks, Dave. That I didn't see that. That was Dave's own comment. I was proud of that night. I would have done it actually different than we had done it. And I think it would have been actually even a little better, but I'm glad that people got the material, and I'm glad they felt immersed, because that's what it was about. It was about immersing everyone in the soundstage to make them feel just as close to Prince as they could with sound. His microphone, I had been a fan of this microphone for a couple of years. And in the promo photo, they used a Shure 58. They used an older microphone that they just stuck up there, and he reached out to the camera and they took promo photos, and it wasn't what we used at all. I think those were taken a couple of days before. I put the microphone coming from the other side, so it wasn't in the way of the audience. I also switched to a certain microphone, and Prince said to me, I'd like to be able to sing from way back here. And he leaned back from the microphone at least 2 feet from the mic. And I said, that won't be a problem at all. I know exactly how to do it. And I was very confident in a certain way I run vocals where they won't feed back. It's nearly impossible with the technique that I've created for mics not to feed back. Prince has always had to sing really up on a microphone, right? And when you want to play the microphone like an instrument and use its proximal effect, use proximity as an effect to fade out or to fade in, it's very hard if you feel like you have to be on the microphone. So I said, yeah, no problem, man. But I needed that microphone. I needed the microphone that I wanted. So I went to a local dealer and I just bought it myself for cash. I mean, it's not that expensive a microphone. I went in and I said, do you have one of these mics? And he said, yeah, we can get it today. And I said, great. And I bought it and used it on the show. Still have it here somewhere. And it's the only time it was used. The one time it was used was that show. Actually, that's not true. It was that show. And then wasn't there a DJ night there was a DJ night that Prince and Kirk played together.
With Michael, well, you're talking about for that weekend?
Yes.
Yeah, it was Michael Holtz DJ to the max, and then Prince was on the other side, then he was DJ. That's where I believe, as you said earlier, that's where the photo is behind you. It's from that DJ night.
Okay, right. Yeah, that was the night. This photo wasn't January 21st. It was the 23rd. Because you can see I'm rocking you see I got the PA slamming right there. And so that was the night that it was just a DJ set. And I took a picture. So I don't want to get out of the way of it. So my console is working overtime. If consoles could sweat, there'd be sweat pouring off that console. That baby was working. But Prince wanted me to push it to the limit. So he let me have a digital console, but I just gave him all the volume he wanted. But getting back to the microphone, I bought that mic and used it on that show and then the DJ show a couple nights later. And then I just put it back and I bought it. I zipped it up in that bag and I kept it because I knew clearly didn't know where that was going to go. But it was important enough that I wanted to use it only for Prince because he went to check the mic on the 20th and he said, what kind of mic is this? First he said, does the mic have an afro that I can use? And I said, yeah. And so I put the screen on it. He wanted the screen on it. I think I put the screen on it. And he said, then he explained, and I said, you can sing from way back there, man. That's no problem. So he leaned up and went, and check 1, 2. And then he turned immediately and said, and where has this mic been my whole career? And I said, well, we got it now, man. Because I knew it would work for him. I just knew the color of it was right. It felt right. There was even a little purple chrome ring that came on the mic. He probably thought I did that for him, but it comes with the mic. So I knew that was the right mic for him. I knew the way I use the way I set a vocal up is that with the compression and to keep it quiet, he could sing from way back here, and he did. And at the show, and people ultimately will see at the show how far back he was able to sing, and it was still really, really clear. And just as, and no one knows this, I've never vocalized this. The night when he was done with rehearsal on the 20th, and he said, cool, Scottie, I'm fading. I got to go get some rest. And I said, cool. He said, we're not going to do a sound check tomorrow. Just leave all the settings as they are. We'll be fine. I said, cool, man. And I had work to do because I still had to work out the smoke machines and how we were going to make all that work. So as he left, I made sure I heard that door shut. That door shut sound to his apartment is burned into my memory. So when I heard the door shut, I waited another 30 seconds and I actually took off what I do to his vocal to make him able to sing from that far back. Excuse me. I took that off and feedback just started like crazy. So, and I just, and I shut it off and turned the stuff back on. And I thought, there's not another human on earth that would have been able to make that happen the way I knew. I was waiting forever to use that technique on Prince. And I had worked out those things in the couple of years prior. And I think I worked it out on Lady Gaga or Scissor Sisters, where I came up with this technique. And even as far back as Stevie Wonder, I said, I know what will sound great on Stevie's voice if I do this. And so I was waiting to use that technique on Prince. So it was just a magical, convergence of all these techniques and things that happened on that night that were very special.
And I remember a 2002 celebration, Xenophobia. I believe it was the second time he did the one night alone shows, because he had 7 different nights of performing.
Yes.
He did 2 shows, but before he's doing joint repetition, like he said, woo, like kind of like maybe 10 feet away from the mic, and it picked it up.
Yeah.
So the sound of Paisley was always amazing. There's 2 other questions I want to get, but people, they want to know what the name of that microphone's called. If you want,
it's called. See, I've never gotten anything from him, and Bob knows the guy who makes them. He's an old guy. I don't know if he's still around with us, but his okay. You're welcome in advance, Bob. It's a Heil. It's Heil. Heil Sound. The name of the company is Heil Sound. Heil. Heil PR35, and it's cheap. Cheap. I think it's 200. I think I paid $206 for that mic or something. And I just paid it in cash and left because I knew I had to get it before we started that rehearsal on the 20th. Heil PR35. Now people are going to, if you could see Heil sales tomorrow, they're going to go boop, and they're just going to peak a little. It's this, the magic isn't in the microphone. It was part of the magic, but it was made sweeter by using that, because I knew that mic would work for him. But anybody who tells you have to have a $3,000 mic or a $10,000 mic, or I know somebody who has an $80,000 mic. Dave Hampton could give you stories all day long because he knows better than anyone in the industry what people are getting from microphones. It's not, the magic is not in the mic, because you can turn all the gear on in the world and you can have the flyest gear. Is fly even a word anymore? Dope. Your gear can be dope.
Is dope a word anymore?
I don't think so. I'm losing it now. But you could have the best gear possible, but if it's just sitting on, it doesn't do any good. It's what you put into it. Then Prince obviously knew how to work that mic, especially that night. He did things performance-wise at a piano. I mixed him a million things with him playing piano or keyboards or Rhodes. And he played, the way he worked the microphone that night was different than he had ever worked it before. So I was really glad I could help him get to where he wanted to be.
Right. 2 questions that I saw, so we'll do a 2-parter.
Sure.
Did he ever make you pancakes? And you're still going to be touring with the Revolution when they do start touring again, right? That's what they're hoping.
Yeah, for sure. Never made me pancakes. We didn't break bread a lot together. To be really to be serious about it, we had a dinner. The last time I ate with him was at I always forget the name of the band, Cult of Personality. That band. Living Color. He invited me down to meet with he and I think a female friend of his, that maybe Candace Springs, that's who it was. And I think Kirk or Marone called me and said he wants you to meet down there to watch his band. So I didn't know why, so I dressed up and met him on this freezing night. at the end of 2015 or whatever it was, and watched Living Color. We had a big meal there. He had everything, all the vegetable stuff. I was looking for the meat. Like, where's the meat? And now it wasn't to happen. So
Right.
so we didn't break bread that often together. Never pancakes. But I'm sure he had good pancakes. I don't know if he made good pancakes. People probably said, "Oh yeah, they're great, Prince," but even if they weren't, because he had that kind of personality. But and then what was the second question? Because I'm delirious at this point.
Revolution.
Revolution, sure. They hold a very special place in my heart. Bobby was sort of adamant that I be involved, and he was supported it right from the start. We had a meeting with Bobby and Fink. Bobby and Matt Fink and I met at the now gone Rudolph's Barbecue, the infamous Rudolph Barbecue, and we sat under the Purple Rain poster, the one that you have on your wall right there. You didn't get that from Rudolph's Barbecue when they went out of business, did you? We sat under that.
Actually, the Groman's Chinese Theater, that's the one that hung in the lobby.
Yeah, well, there you go.
So
you crazy collectors. So we had this meeting, and Bobby said, "You're the guy. We haven't toured in a long time. Help us put this together." I had to listen to all the drum sounds, and Bobby and I recreated all those loops together, and we started from scratch on all the loops, and with the help of Bruce Forat out in Los Angeles, who owned the Lynn Drum Company, through Roger Lynn and Bruce Forat, and they got me a Lynn, and I sampled it, the drum machine that Prince used, and I just worked at it and made it, with the whole band. It's, those five, they're so creative, and Stokely on vocals. That band is so creative that they were so easily. To me, it's as if they hadn't stopped touring. They just got right on the horse, and everyone knew their parts, and they brought it all back together really quickly. And I was very, maybe I'm not in a position to say so, but I'm super proud of them. Look, I got you yawning, Doc. You're holding back a yawn. Are we at 305, 303 yet? We gotta come on.
Keep going. We're gonna make it free.
Okay, good.
I don't drink caffeine or anything, so don't worry. That's why I said when you had the cappuccinos, I'm like, maybe I should start drinking that.
No, I just, Prince is now talking about Prince is bringing out the competition in me. I'm not a competitive person by nature, and I think that actually served me in working with Prince. I wasn't into the competition. I always said, "No, man, come on, cooperation over competition." And I'd said that to him maybe a half dozen times. You think so? You think you can do it better? And I was like, "Oh man, you know me, I'm into cooperation over competition." But I feel like competing with Michael Bland tonight. We only have about 20 minutes to go. We're going to just erase that 302.
What was someone asking? Although
I love the questions.
They were talking about the Bay Area, but you weren't at the shows. Did they ever talk to you about scalpers and how much, they were charging, especially after the Music Club era?
No. The only thing that we talked about was, the most we talked about that was in 2002, the One Night Alone tour. He was very, he was downright excited about the idea of having the fans up front. That was a big deal to him. And I think it was he, and if I'm wrong, I don't want to give or take away credit, but I think Sam Jennings really was an integral part of putting that together as well. And Sam and Prince sort of worked that out. So it was really cool how you had to look through the first 8, 10, 15, 25 rows of fans, and the hardcore fans got the best seats because they were in the fan club. So when you're back in the 30th or 50th row and you have to look through all these people that are just rabid, it tends to have an effect on the whole show. And even if you're not playing the hits, which we didn't do the hits in 2002. So I think it was important that he felt like he was getting around the scalpers by giving the fan club the best seats, which I know was a victory, because he did not like people making a profit off him, unearned profit off of him.
Right. Do your kids know any Prince songs? It's a different question.
Good question. Barely. My girls are very, very, everybody thinks their kids are the best, right? Their own kids, but my kids are great. My girls are great. And my wife's an opera singer and professional singer. So there's a lot of singing going on in our house. It's not as much, and the girls both have great voices. I hear them, they're starting to harmonize now. And now that I've introduced them to recording, I said, listen, just record a part and go back. And I have them in GarageBand recording on their own. And they don't play any instruments, but they sing and they vocalize. And it's beautiful. And they know some Prince songs, but I don't have Prince rolling in my house all the time. I listen to different things. I listen to, I oftentimes, I know on a more serious note, I go away to, I go away from music when I'm not working in it. Now one would think, okay, well, we've had a year off here with this circumstance of being what they are, but I still go away to silence and to that other band member other than me. I go to silence and I go to podcasts. I listen to podcasts, and I've been deep diving on a podcast about the Boundary Waters, because I'm excited to go there. If we do have this year off, like it looks like we will, I'll be making a lot of trips up to the Boundary Waters. So I found Tumble Home, which is a great podcast, Brothers of the Serpent. There are certain, and Cosmographia, but my podcasts are seemingly boring. They're about geology and geography and camping trips and stuff. So I don't really have music rolling in my house the way you think I would. I look at music, a lot of times I look at it as a very, I'm very analytical about music and how it's constructed. But when I do hear new music and good music, I think about what I would do live to make it sing the best it could. And I bet you anything, I can improve just about every artist who's touring. That's probably why I should move on and just be a consultant. And we're all talking about the word pivot. How do you pivot as a podcaster? How do you pivot as a tour manager? How do you pivot as somebody who works in the acting industry? People moving out of LA en masse in droves of people are moving. How do you maneuver and pivot? And just naturally being now in my early 50s, a few more years and I'll be the age Prince was when he passed. I have to make a move as well. It's not really sexy to be like a 60-year-old sound guy, right? Maybe cool at 29, but I don't want to be I'm already the old guy in the room. That's what's great about working with the Revolution is like, I go, yeah, I'm still the kid around here. But those guys are fun. Well, I'll go out as soon as they're ready. And as soon as everybody's cool with it, I think the people there, as long as there's still, I wouldn't speak for Wendy, Bobby, and Mark and Matt and Lisa, or Stokely, when the world is ready, I think the world will need those songs. The world will need that music. And, whatever it is that'll be put together, whether it's with Revolution or going back to China, China's opening up now. So I can potentially go back to China as I was on at twice a month basis, and work with Wang Lihong in stadiums. It's big shows over there, much bigger shows than we have in America. And that'll open up sooner or later. This stuff will start to unfold. And if it's to be, it'll be. And, but I think I should probably move on to being more of somebody who either comes in and consults on mixes or live shows and just sort of gives opinions and sort of gets people in the right direction. It's time for me to teach and let the young people do it.
Right. And consult. What Prince tour were you not a part of that you wish you were a part of?
That's a good song. That's a good question. Wow. Probably, I would say Love Sexy. Not because it was my favorite band of his, but I believe the challenges for me as an engineer, I would have really crushed that tour. Purple Rain. No, you know what? I'll say this. The one that I regret not doing was I was asked to do the 21, the 21 Nights in London. And I was busy. I had something else going. And again, that gets to that attraction, the yes, no, so Trevor Allen, Prince's old security guy and right-hand man, he called and said, hey, yo, he wants you to do this thing. We're doing in London. We're doing this thing. I said, no, man, I'm not available. And he's like, I can't tell him that. I said, well, put me on the phone with him. I'll tell him. I don't care. I'm going out. I have another tour that's 6, 7, or it was like 7-month tour. I said, I'm not going to pass that up. And I think that in a way that keeps that attraction there, because then it's like, oh, well, you went off and did this, but come back to me. And there's artists have that. They do have that competition in them. And I forgot even now what tour it was, but he made some comment about a parking space that I think I may have taken of his. And he said, did my money pay for that car? And I said, no, Madonna money paid for that car. So, and he said, because I always kind of, somebody's got to keep him in check. He couldn't run around unchecked, for all those years. So I was never afraid of the truth. Man, I'm just looking at the clock. Half of me is looking at the clock, just like, Michael Bland can talk. Oh my God.
Well, he was going to stay on even longer. It's the person that was with him. I think his wife was like, dude, like, I want to spend some time with you tonight.
Well, as long as people have questions, I love answering them, because I know what it's like to have a question,
right,
and then want an answer to it. And so I'm welcome to all comers.
Here's a personal one. Do you have any hearing problems like tendinitis or just hearing loss?
No, that's another great, really adroit observation. I have been fortunate, and I really mean it. I would if there's something wood around here, I'd knock on wood. I've been very fortunate to not have suffered any hearing loss in my time mixing. I don't mix particularly loud, or loudly, whatever. I tend to want a show that sounds really clear and has impact and moves air, and you can feel the subs, but I don't get it so loud. I think volume is a thing that we do when it doesn't sound great. We think volume is going to fill in. That's a really good question. I'll answer that next.
That was by accident.
Oh no. Well, we can talk about that. I have a whole theory on that. No, I've had hearing tests. I used to get my hearing tested after every tour, and I have somewhere I've kept it. I have the graphs, and I have my hearing tests, and I would do that. I would go to an audiologist in St. Louis Park. I would go here in the Twin Cities, and just so that I was keeping tabs on my hearing, and making sure that if I had a loss in a certain area, I had to make sure I knew that when I was mixing that would need to be represented, but not overrepresented. Do you understand? I would have to make up for that adjustment. Did Prince have any hearing problems? Now, yes, he definitely had hearing problems. You would have to talk to someone who examined him, or who gave him a hearing test to get the real story on it. But my theory is that he had based on what he asked for and the way he asked for it from me. Often when he would fire a monitor engineer and I would go up and have to fix things and do them from scratch, he would say, no, there's too much this. And I would go, or not enough this. And I would go, no, man. And I knew what it was. To me, my personal theory is Prince had a loss of mid-range in his hearing. He often complains about things being too papery, too much high end. He never used the word sizzle, although that's a good word to describe where he was talking about in the EQ range. He would say it's too papery, too much high end. He would just go, ew, and plug his ears. But it wasn't too much high end. So when you complain about too much high end and too much low end, like it's too boomy, it just feels like I just hear boom. That means you've lost mids. You understand? You have to look at the negative of it. So complaining of too much high end and low end meant he wasn't hearing the mids. I think all the years of guitar didn't do him any favors. All the years of listening, and Dave Hampton and Chris James and maybe Susan or Peggy, somebody could chime in on that as well. But he listened to his studio. In the studio, he listened at an ungodly volume, a volume you would never be able to replicate in a car or at home. Dave Hampton did the smartest thing I think anybody could do. And he took some of the speakers. He took the same manufacturer of speaker that I was using on the road, and he installed them in Studio C. So when Prince wanted to go and listen back to the musicology tour, he would go into Studio C to listen to the mixes. So he was hearing it out of the same speakers with the same EQ curve that I had on it. And that was a really brilliant idea by Dave. He's such a special person. I'm really glad I recommended Dave to Prince, and I think their relationship and working relationship was mutually beneficial. Dave was certainly as good at, that's a lot to say, but Dave Hampton is certainly as good at what he does as Prince was at what he did. There are people out there that are as good at what they do as Prince is at what he did.
Someone wants to know how is there any difference? How is mixing music different from the artist in China, different from music here in the States?
God, these questions, I'm telling you, honestly, these are great questions. That's a very good question. There's an artist named Lihom Wang. His name is Leehom. Lihom Wang, W-A-N-G. In China, you put the surname, you switch it around. So he's Wang Lihom in China. No one's ever heard of him here in the States. He was a fan of mine and probably, I think, heard an interview with me or something and got a hold of me and said, I need you to mix my tour. I've wanted to work with you. And he's no joke. I mean, all his shows are between 50 and 90,000 people a night. So he, the first thing that happened when I got to China is I had a meeting with Lihom and I said, okay, all these are huge places, outdoor places. Every week we had, it was always between 50 and 90,000 or 50 and 80,000 people. And so I said, what disconcerts me most is that between songs, the people in China, they're so appreciative for about 3.5 seconds and then they stop cheering. So I joked, but if you were lost in the stadium, got disconnected from your friends, and you just wait till the end of the song and everyone cheers really loud, it sounds just like an American stadium, and then it stops. And that's the time to go, Jerry, like if you lost your guy, you just yell out because you would hear it anywhere in the stadium. It's dead silent. And I said to Lihom, I went, wow, that's even different than Japan. Like China, you're not allowed to stand at the shows. So you can't stand up. So Lihom, being a very smart performer, he gave everyone in the crowd 80,000 light sticks, LED light sticks. And those change colors. And there's a lighting person for those colors. Again, I have to bring up the great Roy Bennett. Roy is the best at Roy is every bit as good at what he would probably deny it, but he's every bit as good at what he does as Prince was at what Prince did. Roy designed the show for Lihom. It was a fantastic show. I can't say enough about Roy and working with someone on his level. It always brings the game up. And Roy designed the lighting for the movie Purple Rain, the sequences, the live sequences. Roy was insistent that they look a certain way. And Roy and Prince said no. And Prince was like, listen, this is my guy, and he's going to light it like a concert. I want it to look like a concert. Anytime you watch Purple Rain, you can just say a little thank you to Roy Bennett. And Roy's gone on to this fabulous career with the top artists in the world, all of them. And so, I never reached out to Roy, surprisingly, but I reached out to Lihom and I said, what do we do here in between songs? I mean, everything is so synced up and then there's just dead silence. I feel I'm not used to that. And I said, should I help with some reverbs and things to kind of smear and bring those songs together? And he's like, yeah, do your thing. I need those suggestions, but musically. But he said, it's just how the Chinese people are. They'll applaud and then stop. And so I had to get used to that. So mixing is different in that they don't want it too loud. And that's fortunate because I'm not a loud engineer anyway. I like it to sound really beautiful, but not too loud. And then I got in China, I got the pleasure of working with Roy's great design. So Roy's design was done before I ever started mixing. So as soon as they started rehearsing in Tianjin in 2018, I saw Roy's show. So I went, oh, I can try and match Roy's intensity on this song. And when Roy did something really with a lighting design that was very captivating and small and had video content that was sparse, I sort of tried to follow that pattern of mixing the show the way it was already laid out in lights. So it's part of it was the way the Chinese people react to a live show. Part of it was me following Roy's already done design in mixing the show into his lighting and video design.
Someone asked, is it easier or harder to do the sound in an arena versus an open stadium?
They both have, it's a horse and a zebra. I could say that the answer everyone wants to hear is like, arenas are harder. They captivate the sound. Stadiums are great because they're outdoors and the sound goes away. Yeah, that's true. There is some truth to that. But every arena has a different sound to it, and every stadium has a different sound to it. So is it easier to mix or harder to mix an arena or a stadium? They both have their challenges. The best shows I've heard sometimes are in theaters, because theaters oftentimes are designed for taking in a vocal performance or an audio performance of acoustic nature at the center of this stage. I find that theaters are a wonderful place to see a show because everyone's sort of in the middle, right? Arenas are designed for sports, frankly. I mean, it's very, very seldom do you find an arena designed for, I mean, you just don't find it that they're designed. And you have to watch, as Dave Hampton said, you got to watch what happens in the music business coming out of this COVID. Is you have to watch first what the sports teams do, because they own all the venues that all these artists play in. Right. So watch the sports model, see what they're doing to get over this and their ability to play. And then you're going to see the entertainment model follow that, because everyone wants to play arenas. But in China, I didn't have to worry about that because we're all playing all stadiums.
Right.
I mean, Lee Holmes got 1 billion fans. 1 billion fans. When Beyonce goes to sleep at night on her perfume sheets, she dreams of being as popular as Lee Holmes. And people will go, who? And then everyone's Googling him now. But you find out this guy is an actor, super successful actor. He's the closest thing we have in the States is maybe Timberlake. You know, somebody who acts, got a musical career, does this. But Lee Holmes writes all his material, mixes it all, masters it, releases it, directs his own videos, directs other movies, acts in movies. He's like and he speaks, his native language is English. You know, he grew up on the East Coast in somewhere in New York, and moved to Taipei. So you're dealing with a whole different level of person. I mean, not another person that's as good at what they do as Prince is.
Now, Matt wants to know this. Since you're working towards passing Michael Bland's interview time, any fun stories about working with Michael Lee, or any tips drum tones like Michael?
Another great question. Man, you guys are walking me right. You're just walking me by the arm right up to 203, 303. Michael is a super, he's a music machine. I've always said I feel the same way about Michael. And no disrespect to anything Michael has loved, or anyone who has loved Michael in their life, but I think Michael is married to music the same way Prince was. I somewhere quoted, I think on Michael Dean's show, that any woman in Prince's life will only be a mistress to music. And I sort of made that saying up, and it sounds harsh, but it's truth. So music is always the love, and a partner is then becomes a mistress. I don't necessarily feel that way. Possibly Michael can speak for himself. He can. But Michael is made of music. Michael Bland used to, his parents lived in a place over in St. Paul near a train track, off Como Avenue in St. Paul. And he told me once, and he might've said it in an interview, he used to hear the rhythm of the train going by. And a guy like that, like Michael, it doesn't pass by him. And he was just suddenly like, yeah, man. And just kind of possessed by that rhythm. So Michael grew up hearing train sounds. So, that you put that input into a brain like his with perfect pitch, perfect tempo. What Michael had to do, along with Morris Hayes' help, on the tours that I saw them do and was a part of 90 through 94, was incredible. I mean, Michael would start songs and have the tempo going, and then Morris would start a vocal sample. Well, it better be the right tempo, because there's no click track. Nowadays everybody has the inner monitors and click tracks going on. And Michael he's both a machine, he's part machine, but he's tons of feel. He's just total feel as well. He's really, if you've ever been, and Doc, I know you've been in a room with Michael playing, just acoustically, it's just a great sound. His sounds, I always tried to go for a sound that represented Michael and his size and his strength when I tuned the drums. But Michael, he would oftentimes, when I was tuning his drums, I would start from the low tom, and I would tune, if he had 3 toms, I would think of the song Taps. And if Michael would walk in while I was tuning, he'd go, "Man, I'm in a bad mood. Flatten that top tom down half step." And I go, "Oh," so I go da 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 da, and because he wanted a minor tuning that night on his drums. Nobody else, no drummers say that. Drummers don't do that.
Right.
And Michael did. It does and did, and he had an attitude, loud and deliberate. And Michael always was deliberate about how he did things, even when he broke it down. As you can hear in the song, "Shh," right? It's Michael playing on that. He would, when he gets to break it down and does that side stick, it still goes snap. Michael's got this power and force behind him that he always kept the intensity high. He knows he's a master player, so he knows how to play live and how to differ that when he plays in the studio. Just a master. And then one would think then, because I'm pushing it, I got minute 48 to break his time.
More questions though. You're gonna pass it up. It's all good.
One would think that that once you had Michael Bland in your band, why would you ever have another drummer, right? So people would legitimately say, well, Prince has had, he had Bobby in the early days. He went to Sheila. He had this. He had Michael Bland. Oh man, amazing drummer. Keep him forever. Well, Prince went to Cora and Hannah and John Blackwell, and he had so many great drummers, Kirk. And the reason he did that is because Prince wanted a different flavor. That's the same thing people ask me. Well, I can come up with my own question here, which is, why did Prince, if he had your great sound and he had the success with you, why would he go to another sound engineer? Some of that was because I was unavailable. Other times he would just choose a different sound engineer. And he did that because he wanted a different flavor, wanted a different sound, wanted something that was different than what he had.
Right. Yeah. What would have been how different would the sound have been sound wise if he started using the new grand piano versus electronic keyboard?
Meaning for the piano and microphone show? If he would have used a grand, he needed to use a synthetic, an electric, a fake grand. He needed to use a keyboard because he wanted that sustain with the string sound. On his Motif 8 Yamaha keyboard, he could play a piano chord and then use a slider, a fader, and fade up and have those strings sustain to get him musically to the next interstitial thing he wanted to play. That's why he used the string patch, was just for some support that didn't get in the way, but it supported his musical feeling that he had going. When we got to Australia, now I chose the Piano and Microphone show, January 21, 2016, was his fake piano. It was the purple hollow piano, and he had his Motif 8 inside of it. And I actually put monitor speakers inside there as well for him to hear. So that was done with his own keyboard. There's no secret to that. That piano is well traveled, and he had danced on it and done TV shows, and he had a couple of them, but it was a workhorse hollow piano with all sorts of tubing and NASCAR style pipes in there that were supporting it. I knew I had to choose the right piano for him for Australia. I chose a grand, a Yamaha, that was a silent, it's called a silent grand. Yamaha has a series it is a great piano. It's an amazing $70,000, $90,000 piano, but you can hit a button and all the hammers disengage, and then you're just playing out of the sound control unit down underneath the piano. I knew he needed that for 2 reasons. Number one, the kind of volume Prince wanted me to amplify that show, I knew if I had microphones on the piano, it would start feeding back. I knew that. I didn't want to fight that fight. I insisted that we get a certain C7X SH, which is a silent Yamaha silent grand piano, and I secured one in Australia. I think they had to bring it into Australia to do the shows. A brand new black one. I took the outputs from the piano. I also did put microphones on the inside, and I tried them one day when Prince wasn't there. I tried switching to the microphones. It just didn't have the power in the left hand. It didn't have the singing. You're dealing with an amazing sampled Yamaha CFX, $150,000, $200,000 piano. So I knew that would be best. The only thing Prince didn't have was a slider to control the amount of strings he had. It was just a patch change. And I'll give it to Prince. He never screwed up. I think it was patch. There were 19 patches, including Rhodes and Wurlitzer and synthesizers and harpsichord. And Prince tried them all out at Paisley Park. And because I got a piano brought there for him to try before we went to Australia. Here's what's going to be there, man. And he played it on patch 1, which is a grand piano. Well, the patch that had the grand piano and strings mixed in was like patch 17 or something. So he had to go down from patch 1 down to 19, 18, 17. He had to go 1, 2, 3, and then play the one with the strings, and then go up 1, 2, 3, and hope it was still on patch 1 without actually looking like that. And I'll give it to him. In all of Australia, he never made one mistake. He would just go like that and start playing. And if he would have played on the wrong patch, Prince was enough of a pro that he would have gotten around playing something else and then getting back to the right thing. Right. So it would have been a disaster to try and do that at the volume I did with a real grand, miking a real grand piano. It could have been done. The top would have had to been open. He couldn't have had his iPad to look at lyrics. Do you understand? Like a series of events, unfortunate series of events follows if you have to have the piano open to the crowd. Plus he faced the wrong way. He faced to stage right. Normally a pianist always in a live setting faces towards stage left so that the piano can be open and the sound can reflect off the piano and go out to the crowd. He wanted to face the other way. Maybe that's his good side. I don't know. But he said, I want it to face this way, like it is in the photo behind me. You're actually looking at the keys right here. So those are the keys and the piano's facing the other way. So that's how it was set up, always facing towards stage. He was facing towards stage right. So it wouldn't have worked to do a real grand piano. And I'm glad that I convinced him to do it.
I think this might be the last question. Do you think that Prince was born to be as amazingly talented as he was, or do you think he was just so driven that he made it happen? What do you think differentiated Prince from other artists as far as how he wrote and the way sound occurred to him and your ability to bring his sound to life in the room?
There's a lot to unpack. You'll have to repeat the second one, but the first one, I believe that all of us are born with certain abilities. They are able to be refined and we are able to build upon our abilities. Prince was a huge believer in rehearsing and getting it right in rehearsal, so that the show, you didn't have any question as to whether or not the show was going to be a huge success. It's just how much success he wanted during that show. I think he had that drive in him his whole life. Where that drive comes from, who knows? Could be a family thing, could be with a relationship with the parents or family members. I don't know. Taika may have more insight into what drove him as a young man to succeed, but he certainly had all the musical ability in him. What was the second part, Doc?
Second part, go back to it. What do you think differentiated Prince from other artists as far as how he wrote and the way sound occurred to him and your ability to bring his sound to life in the room?
He was able to, in a very natural way, in an uneducated way. He didn't go to college for it or anything. So it was a natural flow out of him and his ability to be able to get it down and get it recorded. And that was very natural. And how it affected, I think just because he had a more direct line from his thought to how it was recorded and done and released. That was his secret, is that he didn't stew over it and mull it over and think, well, let me have somebody else mix it and then see how it sounds. And let me do a remix of this and let me do this. The guy just recorded things and got them down and released them. He didn't, because he had so much behind it. It's like Lucille Ball trying to keep the candy from falling off the conveyor belt. At some point, she starts stuffing them in her bra and in her mouth. Like he had so many songs coming out. That's probably the first and only time you'll ever hear Prince and Lucille Ball in the same sentence. But Prince had so much in him. He was very capacious. He had a huge capacity. And so what he did is he got it out, got it down and got it out to people and didn't overthink the process. How that worked for me, number one, I was able to work with all of his best material. And it was a lot harder for Roy and for lighting, because you have to design something from scratch. Like, this is what I think. What do you think? Or this is what I'm feeling. Right. This is how the colors, and this is how it should look. You have to start from scratch. I had something against which I could listen to a song and go through these really sweet custom super old headphones. Dudley, I could listen to a song and say, I know already I have the template for how it should sound live. Then I would have discussions with Prince or Gaga or Madonna or Stevie Wonder, whoever it was, any artist. I would say, or Lee Holm, I'd say, how do you want this to change? How do you want this to be altered from what it exists on the record to create, to maximize or minimize the impact of the material? And that's a conversation that we had, and then I would work toward the feel of a show. But it was Prince's material was easy with which to work, because the material itself had a life of itself. And I want to say one thing that, as an addendum to that question, I'm filibustering at this point. We're going to go 4 hours. I hope you can yawn out in the
my bladder would beg to differ, unless I put you on the screen by yourself for a little bit.
Oh man, and I wish I could see the questions. I'd go another hour. I got nothing. So
turn it on for you.
I don't know, not on stream yet. Are they on the right there?
Your side, and it should have it.
Yeah, I see them. I see comments, right?
Yeah, and then you click on it, it'll turn it on in your side. I did put it that you can access.
Oh wow, I'm telling you. But I have to say that Prince, through all of it, he's someone who knew how to perform live, and he knew how to be impactful no matter what his venue. Like, he was somebody that understood the venue and understood how to make the most impact. He was a very impactful fellow, I should say.
Right.
Yeah. Somebody get Doc a catheter.
Yeah. Is that you can't see comments now?
What I did is I moved you over so that you're in the center of my screen, because I already think, we live in the world of Zoom now. Everyone knows this watching, right? No matter where in the world they're watching, I'm looking here at you on the screen, but it would have been weird for me to look. I would have wanted to look right in people's eyes like this, blah, blah, blah. But I'm looking a little down because I'm looking at your reactions. I'm trying to listen to you and exchange with you, but it's weird, right? I think when we actually all can meet in person again, we're all going to be looking at each other's necks, just because we're used to looking down when we.
Not.
I know.
But
hey, but you look good. You look like, with that thing on you, the scarf, and you look like Thurston Howell, like a really hyped up, dope version of Thurston Howell. Get it.
Anyway, you gotta, do it these things, make it, because this could be used as a mask too. But I'm like, it's about Nollywood singer and stuff, and then Robert Wagner was wearing stuff like this back in the day, and I'm like,
an ascot, right? Yeah,
that back, yeah. Ask how to look back. Yeah, that's how I'm trying to do things. So then, you have it as a mask, or you can have it worn like this. You do different things. Pull it up, pull it down.
Hey, you could rob an oldie timey bank if you want. Just pull that thing up, and you're ready. We made it, Doc. We did 3 hours. I should say that people can, if they want to give me more questions, I have no problem with it. God knows, anyone saying they don't have time for things nowadays is a liar. So if anyone has questions, I'm Scottie Baldwin on Instagram. I'm Scottie Baldwin on, what's the other one? I don't do Facebook. I do the other one, Twitter. I tweet at Scottie Baldwin. But you can ask me stuff. I really understand the perspective of the fan and people who tuned in tonight to, I even thank Chris James and Michael Dean and Dave and Taika, because what they're doing is they're taking time to talk and to watch and interact with someone who was not on stage with Prince. They were a technical support of his artistic endeavor. And that's really important to say that I care enough at least to give it a shot and to listen to what this guy has to say. He worked with Prince over a long period of time, and they want to know more about the people that worked with him. And And I appreciate that. And I understand the feelings that are behind spending 3 hours watching something like this. I appreciate it to anybody who's made it this far.
They have, and then there'll be some people that go back and watch it, or don't tune in live because they're in other countries or whatnot, but it'll be good. I always appreciate having you on and our discussions that we have, as I keep trying to make the show better and more presentable and doing different things when the weather permits, when it isn't ridiculously crazy hot to where I can't wear a suit jacket or whatnot or look as professional. But
you look smashing. Smashing is the word. I'm going to leave you with this tease. I'll tease everyone out there. If you made it 3 hours, over 3.25 hours, how cool would it be because I'm going to bring it back home to January 21st, 2016. How cool would it be to be able to, and I've thought about this, take that show on the road and to play it back at Paisley Park, and where I mix from the same position I did, with a piano in the same spot that it was, and to go to Australia and to set up the stage like it was, and to play the show back, the exact show with the multi-tracks back in the venues that it was actually in. And to look forward to something like that. And then maybe I'd do a Q&A. Kirk and I'd come out and do a Q&A after every show. And, and you could listen to the material and be enveloped again like that. That's the idea that I had, that I want on the record right now of thinking about. I've got it all written down somewhere, a whole plan for it. But that would be, I think, a natural thing that people would be interested, is not just hearing the Jan 21 show, but hearing the Australia shows and hearing them in the form that they really were and in the venues that they were meant to be and sound the way they did. I think that's an interesting thing to leave people with, that thought. And I think it'd be as smashing as your outfit. I think the idea is as smashing as you look.
Well, I try.
316. Wow. 316.
Austin, 316.
See, if we make it to 319, then we got a song title, right?
We always have a song title, but we can make it there. It's just
Will you do your wrap up and see if we can bring us to 319? That would be fitting, because I love that song.
I'll be doing it. I'm just glad, that I've been a part of things. And then, this is why I sometimes feel like I'm representing him. There's different moods that we do, but just always trying to be professional. And, I'm ignored for certain things, but we'll see what happens in the future, as we say. But
you got to get pants on. That's it, Doc. You got to wear pants, because God knows I'm not going to stand up, because I might not have pants on. Then we're just going to go to a whole different level with this broadcast right here.
I always have pants on. I have shoes on.
You know what?
Doing stuff in Good Morning America.
The world's been living in sweatpants for the last year. Matter of fact, it's good to get an old button down on now and again. I think this might have been the shirt I had on during the show. No, I appreciate, as I said before, I appreciate that all the fans spend their time, and people who've made it this far, especially, and how seriously and how personally they take all this. And people want to hit me up on the socials. The Insta and Twitter are the only two I do, but you can hit me up on Twitter, and if you can find, you don't have to sleuth that far to find my email address. You can email me. I can answer questions. I have no problem. I received a really sweet email today from a fan in anticipation of this. It was just a lovely email. And I appreciate it very much. It's people care, and I want to let people know I understand why they care, and I care with them. So I'll look forward to next time. We'll do this again in 2 years, right?
We'll have you on before then, but yes, we'll definitely be doing a 7th anniversary show.
Mm-hmm. I think that'd be apropos.
Then we won't have to mention COVID and all that other crap. So, but yeah, I always dress up for shows or whatnot, or will be matching. Some people ask me to stand up during the show. I'm like, man, when I have my leg surgery sometime this year, hopefully soon, we'll see. Like, I'm not going to be able to stand up because I'm not going to be putting any pressure on. They're like, oh, he's probably sitting in his boxers. Like, nope. It'll be something full on down, but just gotta get this.
We could have a love sexy. We could have a love sexy show where we're clothing optional. We're trying to be like the Love Sexy cover and just sort of strike that pose and we try and get an hour out of that. That might be interesting. How many viewers do you think you'd have then?
Negative.
Yeah, there you go. They'd be paying you, Jeremiah. They'd be paying you to not broadcast it. We like that.
Look, my body looks a lot better than it used to, but
You're svelte. You're looking svelte. I'm proud of you.
Thanks. It's just Prince can pull that off. I can't. How about if I bring like a poster of the image out and I put it here, and then yourself or other people can be nude like that.
I like that. Or one of those things where you put your head through the hole, like at a carnival or something. Actually, there's no name for those things. You know that? Interesting fact. They don't have a name for that thing. There's no name for that. That thing where you put your head through the plywood and take pictures of yourself as Paul Bunyan or whatever. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. I hope people ingest it with love.
Yes. And I thank people for their donations through the show, or people that donate afterwards or whatnot. It's always appreciated. We're trying to do this stuff, trying to bring you the best show possible. Having someone on Scottie on that, will be very detailed and give you guys the insight that you guys want. And it's always appreciated. And I always try to ask different questions than before, especially just trying to focus on the January 21st show, just so it's people that thing of like, hey, like, let me know more about that night, blah, blah, blah. Everything went into it, and that's where we go. Yeah. So, all right. Well, it was good. I'll do you want to be on for the wrap up? I'll still count as part of your time. Don't worry.
No, I'm going to get my girls in bed. I know they're up. I know they're still up. Yeah. Thanks, you guys. We'll see you next time.
Good seeing you, man.
You as well. Thank you.
Be well. All right, guys. It was Scottie. Beyond. Oh, someone's asking how you donate. Here's PayPal if that helps you guys. I do have like the Cash App and Venmo as well. But I appreciate you guys. Here, we'll do this real quick while we wrap up. I'll answer any last minute questions, I guess. So now count towards Scottie's time. Yeah, here's Venmo. And then the Cash App. Sorry, guys. Didn't see if there's any last minute questions, but I thank you guys for being on. I thank Scottie for giving us the time, So there we go. Yes. I was trying to have more stay on for next week, was talking with his people. Arlington right now is in the hospital recovering from COVID. I'm hoping that he makes it through. So I'm not sure that Morris Day show is going to happen. The reason I was doing it is because next week would have been 5 years since the time performed at Paisley in front of Prince. But we can't always get what we want. Wishing Dan, the pancake painter at Lacey, hoping he's doing better, recovering from brain surgery. There's just been a lot of stuff going on. But I'm here with you guys. Yes, got to use the restroom. Think 3.5 hour break. When you guys aren't watching this live or you're listening to an audio, you can stop at any time and use the restroom, or listen to me while you're using to the restroom. But it's not for Morris, it's for Arlington. Morris is fine. It's just that Arlington was the person I was talking to trying to get him on the show. So let's not start anything. But Arlington, hope you fully recover, my man. And we'll talk soon. Thank you, Taika. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Scottie. Thank you, Dustin, for writing on him for the headphones. Appreciate you guys. Dave Chappelle. What? All right, I'll have to check into that. But thank you guys again for subscribing on Apple Music, Stitcher, Spotify, letting other people know about us. It's always appreciated. Till next time, much love. Keep it funky.